On Monday evening around 6:15, the doorbell rang and, to my surprise, it was my cousin Ralph. I rarely get home before midnight, so I assumed he forgot my schedule. After inviting him in, I got him a beer and we watched Monday Night Football while chatting. Ralph seemed disappointed that my wife, Lois, wasn't home, but she had called earlier to say she'd join us after work with her coworkers for a drink. I eagerly awaited her arrival. Lois and I hadn't been lovemaking for over 3 weeks, as she often claimed fatigue or headaches. Ralph left around 8 o'clock, and I stayed up, dozing off in front of the TV, a rare occurrence for me. When I woke up, Lois's car was parked outside, but she hadn't come to fetch me for bed, which struck me as odd. Finally, we were lovemaking, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she frequently found reasons to say no. It made me question my worth as her partner. After repeating this pattern for weeks, Lois asked if she felt too loose, a question that puzzled me. I assured her she was perfect for me, though I knew she wasn't being truthful. From my perspective, there was a moral dilemma. Honesty about physical compatibility was essential, but it needed to be approached delicately. Despite my love for Lois, doubts lingered even after she accepted my proposal, leaving me uncertain about the future. Returning to my attempts to awaken a slumbering Lois for some affection, her groggy voice muttered, "Oh, it's you." My disappointment at finding her asleep in bed instantly ignited into furious anger. "Who did you think it was? You miserable cow?" I exploded, unable to contain my frustration. "What's going on? Who are you with?" Storming off the bed, I snatched my shorts from the floor and stormed downstairs. Grabbing a beer, I retreated to the patio to cool off and process the tumultuous encounter. It seemed like she was interested at first, but when she realized it was me, she declined. Her tone was dismissive, like, "Great, him again." As I stared at the night sky, I questioned for the first time if her claims of spending time with friends were genuine. Doubt crept in. Then the realization hit me. How would I afford a detective to uncover her secrets? It seemed she could read my mind, yet showed no remorse. It was as if she thought, "Oh well, he knows now." Feeling restless, I opted to watch TV instead. Finding a blank tape, I popped it into the VCR and settled in to watch last week's NCIS. The video revealed everything. I paused it and quietly checked upstairs, finding Lois already asleep. Returning downstairs, I resumed the tape and witnessed my wife with my cousin Ralph in the bedroom. The camera angle suggested it was hidden in the closet, capturing their actions. The betrayal stung deeply, and questions flooded my mind about how many times this had happened. Suddenly, a stranger's voice broke the silence. "What did I do to deserve this?" Lois's panicked exclamations drew my attention. She frantically dialed a number, urging someone to answer. Seizing the phone, I confronted her, causing her to recoil in fear. "Why don't you retrieve the tape, Ralph?" I demanded, warning him to stay away from me in the future. With a vow to attend family gatherings, I vowed to cross paths with him someday, promising it would be his worst day ever. I slammed the phone down, glaring at Lois. "Thanks to you and my idiot cousin, I don't need a private investigator. You handed me all the evidence," I spat. Retrieving the tape, I kissed it and played it on the TV. Lois trembled, asking, "What will you do?" "What do you think? I'm divorcing you," I snapped. "I don't want a divorce," she pleaded. I scoffed. "Why not? You clearly don't care about me." Ordering her to leave, I hid the tape and made coffee, compiling a to-do list for the morning. Though our state lacked a no-fault divorce law, infidelity could sway the court's property division. Discovering her infidelity surprised me, but at least I hadn't added her to the house deed. As I made the list, I heard Lois leave. I pondered the rapid shift from love to hate and focused on what I could do next, grateful for the resources available online. As I headed to my room, I noticed the blank tape I had left on the TV was gone, and I smiled, hoping Lois had taken it without watching it. Back at my computer, I secured my finances, transferring most of our joint account funds to my personal savings and canceling joint credit cards, leaving my own intact. Satisfied with my efforts to protect myself, I slept soundly. The next morning, I promptly left for the bank, securing a safe deposit box in my name only, and transferring valuables from the one Lois accessed. At the office, I instructed my secretary to intercept any messages from Lois, informing her of our impending divorce. With each action, I asserted my independence, ready to face the challenges ahead with determination. Myra informed me that Alan wanted to meet me urgently upon my arrival at work. Upon reaching his office, Shirley, his assistant, directed me straight to him. "You're late at a bad time. he remarked as I entered. You need to be on the next flight to Atlanta. Morgan's company is refusing to sign a new contract, and I need you to handle it. I expressed my hesitation, explaining my need to deal with Lois, who posed a threat to my home in my absence. Alan assured me, offering to handle the legal matters through his trusted lawyer, Bert Ellsworth, whom he recommended highly. He arranged for me to contact Ellsworth en route to the airport. With tickets reserved by Shirley, I reluctantly accepted the assignment, recognizing its importance despite my personal concerns. Rushing home, I packed and secured the house before heading to the airport. En route, I contacted Ellsworth, who provided advice and assured assistance. After navigating airport security, I checked in at the Delta counter and waited in the boarding area for my flight to Atlanta. As I mulled over the lawyer's advice, I spun a tale to Ellsworth about Ralph's threats to Lois, concocting a story to justify the restraining order. If he tries anything, I'll knock some sense into him, I falsely assured Ellsworth. I overheard Lois saying she'd love to watch, I added, layering the deceit to keep Lois at bay until my return. Despite the falsehood, I felt justified, considering Lois's own deceptions while entertaining Ralph and others. Ellsworth assured me of the restraining order's feasibility, but warned of a hearing in 10 days to finalize it. My trip to Atlanta proved fruitful as I swiftly resolved the contract issue, earning Alan's praise. He informed me of the locksmith's visit and his son-in-law's plan to safeguard the house. During my Atlanta trip, I made courtesy visits to 2 other clients before boarding Flight 720 home. Checking my phone, I found multiple missed calls and voicemails, mostly from Lois. Deleting her messages, I listened to Ellsworth's urgent plea, urging me to call before matters escalated. Ellsworth's voicemail confirmed he secured a protective order that afternoon and would serve it on Lois at her workplace the next morning. Grateful to Alan for the recommendation, I thanked him. Returning home at midnight, a sheriff's deputy approached, asking for ID. Showing my driver's license, I thanked him for watching the house, assuming he was Alan's brother-in-law. He handed me a ring and keys, explaining that all locks in the house used the same key. Lois had visited twice, getting angry when denied entry. Inside, I noticed the answering machine blinking, but exhausted, I turned off the phone and slept. In the morning, I checked the answering machine and found all messages were from Lois, repeating the same plea to call her. Too late, honey, I thought. At work, Myra informed me of Lois's persistent calls, but assured me she hadn't connected with her. I thanked her, expressing gratitude for her support. Myra joked, "You say that to all the girls," as I kissed her forehead. In Alan's office, I updated him on the situation and thanked him for his help. Alan asked about my plans next. "Get on with life. Maybe find someone who'll put up with me," I replied. Alan encouraged me, saying things would improve over time. Returning to my office, I focused on work. I called Ellsworth, who confirmed the papers would be filed by 10 and offered to serve them to Lois before lunch. I agreed, and Myra invited me to lunch. We went to Tricacci's, where she offered support, knowing the challenge of divorce. "I could use some cheering up," I admitted. Myra handed me a paper, saying, "Here's today's cheer-up attempt." Glancing at it, I found a list of names. "What's this?" I asked. "A list of girls interested in you now that you're single again." Flipping through, I noticed a few surprises. Liz Fisher from accounting. Isn't she engaged? She was, but she kicked him out after catching him cheating. "Do you really think she's into me?" I asked. "I know she is. She once said she'd snatch you up if you were single," Myra replied. I scanned the list again. 7 names, and besides Mary, 2 others might catch my interest. "So, you're saying they're all interested?" "I've heard them express interest in you," she confirmed. I grinned. "I noticed your name isn't here." "I considered it, but given the circumstances, I'd rather not," she explained. "Why?" "Because besides being married, you've just begun your divorce due to your wife's cheating," she reasoned. "I figured dating a married woman wouldn't be on your mind." "You gamble? I thought you and Harold were solid," I remarked. "We were, until I found out he was cheating with his secretary. Instead of divorce, I'm opting for kindness," she admitted. "You're wrong. Even knowing you're married wouldn't stop me." "You should have put your name," I said. "You'd be perfect for me right now." "Now I know you're joking. I'm far from perfect," she laughed. "That's where you're mistaken. You have one characteristic they lack," I teased. "And what's that?" she inquired. "You're married, and they're not." "You'll have to explain that," I remarked. "Right now, I don't need an emotional connection. It'd be too easy to get involved with the 3 on your list I'm interested in, You're already engaged and seem keen on retaliation with your husband. If we got involved, it'd be strictly physical, I explained. Are you serious? She asked. Absolutely, I affirmed. Don't get me wrong, I wouldn't pursue a married woman, but if she's free, that's a different story, I clarified. What about a long lunch then? She suggested. Not today, but tomorrow I'm free, I agreed. It's a date. Hypocritical? Not at all. According to Ellsworth, once Lois received the divorce papers, we'd legally part ways. At 2:45, Lois called. Knowing she'd likely been served, I answered. What do you need? I asked bluntly. Why can't I get into the house? What's with the divorce? Why are my credit cards not working? And the protection order? She demanded. Just out of my mind, I replied tersely. Your cards are inactive because part of divorcing a cheating wife involves canceling her credit cards. And you can't enter the house because you're no longer living there. And I don't want you in, I explained. You need to stop this, Dave. Losing half your assets over a little fling, it meant nothing. I love only you, Lois pleaded. I see it differently. You cheated, making you a strumpet in my eyes, which is why I filed for divorce, I retorted. We should discuss this face to face, Lois insisted. Surprisingly, I agreed. Where and when? She asked. Not tonight. I've barred you from the house, I replied. You can't keep me out, she protested. Actually, I can. The house is mine, not yours. You'll retrieve your belongings with a court official present to ensure fairness, I stated firmly. Let's just talk it out, she suggested. Not here, I insisted. You're being unreasonable. Where then? Lois demanded. Tomorrow, 6 p.m., Angelina's restaurant. We'll have privacy, I proposed. Ending the call, I pondered whether Lois truly believed her excuses would sway me. Sadly, the answer was yes. Why wouldn't she think I was naive? I let her off the hook for years. That evening, I hit the landing strip lounge after work, hoping for a pick-me-up. It was open mic night, so I hoped for some laughs. I sat at the bar, and Karen greeted me. The usual, Dave? She asked. I usually get a PBR and some good company, I replied. I've got a keeper, Karen said, pouring my beer. Then a woman took the stage for stand-up comedy. A surveyor stopped by Will's farm in eastern Minnesota and announced he had some bad news. I have discovered that your farm is not in Minnesota. It is actually located in Wisconsin. Will let out a huge sigh of relief and said, That's the best news I've gotten in a while. I was just telling my wife this morning that I don't think I could stand another winter in Minnesota. She laughed and continued. The New York City Department of Education reports that only 26% of the city's 3rd through 8th graders passed the English exam. But on the other hand, they're too bad at math to realize how bad it is. 2 more comedians followed her act, and I departed feeling notably uplifted compared to my arrival. Maybe there's some truth to the old adage that laughter is the best medicine. The next day at work, as soon as I settled at my desk, Myra reminded me of our lunch date. Despite a hectic morning, Myra and I headed out for lunch at 11:30. En route to the Marriott, I asked if she truly preferred eating before our plans, to which she chuckled and quipped, Being entertained on a full stomach slows me down a tad. I checked us in under the alias Meister and Mrs. Ralph Tomlinson, a fitting nod to Lois's affection for donkeys. Once in the room, we wasted no time getting lovemaking. The remainder of the day flew by, and it was soon time to rendezvous with Lois at Angelina's. Arriving ahead of her, I secured a booth in the quietest corner, far from the dance floor. Ordering my usual, I settled in to await her arrival. When Lois showed up 5 minutes later, she looked as stunning as ever. Normally, her presence would stir certain desires in me, but the knowledge of her actions in our marriage quelled that impulse. As she sat down, she ordered her customary Cosmo, visibly irritated when I requested separate checks. Sipping my beer, I prompted, All right, Lois, you called this meeting, so what's on your mind? Honestly, Dave, you could have been more courteous given the circumstances. Lois, you're lucky I haven't torn you apart. Speak up or I'll walk out. With a sigh, she said, You're blowing things out of proportion, Dave. We don't need to divorce. I love you, always have, always will. My affair with Ralph means nothing to me. Yes, it happened, but it was just physical. Most of the time, I can't stand him. He's never posed a threat to you or our marriage. Why did you prioritize him over me if he means nothing to you? I didn't. Yes, you did. Reflect on the past 6 months. How often have you been there for me? Mostly reluctantly, doing favors. Think about the last 3 weeks. I've heard your excuses every night and stayed out of it while you've been enjoying yourself elsewhere, and you call that love, being exclusive to me? It hasn't been that brief. It certainly has. For 3 weeks, you've been avoiding me, and when you finally say, I'll be lucky to have you home, you just go straight to bed and sleep. When I tried to initiate something, you were all for it until you realized it was me. Remember that, Lois? Remember that? Oh, it's you. I'm tired. Leave me alone. That's all, Lois. Oh, you said it all. And then that tape was the last straw. Then why even tell Ralph these things? Because Ralph likes hearing it. He has some pathetic need to feel superior to you. I tell him these things to boost his ego. There's nothing wrong with you in bed, Dave. You've always satisfied me. Then why seek pleasure with other men? It's not other men, Dave. It's only Ralph. So you don't consider it cheating on me if it's just Ralph? That's not what I meant. Regardless, whether it's one man or many, enjoying another man's company while married is cheating, no matter how you spin it. Answer me this. Before seeing that tape, would you say our marriage was good? Maybe okay, but not great. I dated Ralph before we got married, and it didn't affect us. Did you entertain my idiot cousin before we tied the knot? Yes, I did. Then why marry me at all? Because I love you, Dave. I don't even like Ralph that much. Why are you enjoying yourself with him? Because he provides something you can't. Look at it this way, Dave. Think of Ralph as just assisting you with me. You're crazy if you think you can convince me of that. If that's all you want to discuss, then we're finished. I began to rise from my seat, and she interjected. You'll never persuade Dave that infidelity is acceptable. You lack any evidence to support that claim. Don't forget, I have the tape you and Ralph generously made for me. Are you certain? Absolutely, I affirmed, walking away from her. As I made my way to the door, a grin crept onto my face. Apparently, she hadn't checked the tape she took from home, unaware it was blank. Just as I reached for the car door handle, I heard the click of her heels and turned to find Lois half walking, half running in her high heels. I marveled at her speed in them. Hastening towards me, she pleaded, I need to get into the house, Dave. I need my clothes and belongings. Though I knew I was being insensitive, I felt entitled to it. Have your lawyer contact mine to arrange it, I replied, sliding into the car. Rolling down the window, I bid, Goodbye, Lois, and drove off as she called out, Wait, Dave, just a minute. I could have allowed her to follow me home and retrieve her things without inconvenience. It wouldn't have inconvenienced me. But at that moment, I was thinking, forget her. If she didn't already have a lawyer, it would take her a day or two to find one. Since it was Thursday, I wagered the soonest she could secure one would be Monday, with another day needed to organize her return to the house. By then, I'd have packed all her belongings in garbage bags, showing little care in the process. If I were lucky, she'd have to take everything to the dry cleaner or laundromat before using them. Was I a bit resentful toward Lois? Not really. My relationship with Lois was smooth sailing. I slept soundly that night. On Friday, I had another lengthy lunch with Myra. As a particularly busy period drew to a close, Myra inquired about my weekend plans. Upon learning I had none, she proposed, Would you like to spend the weekend with me? I'd love to, but how will you keep it from your husband? He's going fishing this weekend. He packed up this morning and will leave straight from work. I'm at your disposal from now until noon on Sunday, if you need me, that is. Silly girl, let's see. Dinner and dancing tonight, then play at home. Saturday morning wake up and more playtime. Dinner and dancing Saturday night, followed by more play at home. Sunday morning, play until noon, then brunch. Sound good? Sounds great, but how about we skip the dancing and focus on playing? That won't do. Your energy never seems to fade, and mine needs a break sometimes. All right then, your plan it is. After returning to work, I informed her I'd pick her up at 7. Pack for the weekend, I instructed, since you won't be returning until Sunday. Upon arriving home, I discovered Lois hadn't wasted any time searching for a lawyer. Upon entering the bedroom to change, I noticed part of Lois's dressing room was bare. Most of her belongings were gone. Curious, I investigated how it had happened and found a broken window in the family room facing the patio. Though I couldn't prove Lois was responsible, I derived some satisfaction from spotting blood on the glass shards, indicating she might have injured herself climbing in. I located a glass company in the Yellow Pages, scheduled an appointment for the next day, and decided to leave the mess until morning. With my decision made, I headed upstairs, showered, and dressed for my outing with Myra. We dined, danced, and indulged in drinks. Although we retired at 11, sleep eluded us until 3, leaving me utterly exhausted. After Myra had her fill of me, I set my watch for 9, anticipating the arrival of the glazier between 10 and 12. However, Myra woke me at 7:20 in a delightful manner. While awaiting the glazier, I tidied up the broken glass, completing just as the glazier arrived at 10:10. By 10:40, the repairs were finished, and by 11, Myra and I were enjoying a late breakfast at Tricacci's. Following our meal, I inquired what Myra would like to do next. "Just relax and cuddle. That's all I want," she replied. And that's precisely what we did. Buoyed by our spirits, by 5, we opted to order pizza and continue our leisurely day. We decided against closeness on a full stomach, opting instead to lounge on the couch and watch TV for an hour or two. However, our TV viewing was abruptly interrupted mid-program. Sunday morning dawned, bringing with it the realization that I would have to return Myra to her husband. This realization sparked a thought which I voiced over pancakes at the Village Inn. "How much time do we have left?" I inquired. "What do you mean?" Myra responded. "When are you planning to leave me?" I clarified. "Why do you think I'll leave you?" Myra questioned. "From what you mentioned about flirting with your husband," I explained. "I was under the impression you were just casually flirting, not involved in a serious relationship," I added. "Maybe, but it wasn't my intention. Typically, the men I encountered became possessive, wanting me to leave Harold for them. However, none of them could match Harold's lifestyle," Myra disclosed. "I couldn't fathom trading a comfortable home in a nice neighborhood for a one-bedroom apartment, wondering if we could afford bills each month. Plus, they weren't any better in bed than Harold, and they were messy," she continued. "And I always wore my wedding rings," Myra admitted. "I fail to see the logic. You sought out attention knowing they were aware of your marital status," I remarked. "True, but I wasn't seeking a replacement for Harold. I just wanted retribution. Holding on to them, if they were skilled in bed, didn't imply emotional attachment," Myra confessed. "Admit it." "If they started stalking me knowing I was married, do you think I could ever trust them if I made the relationship permanent? So I'm just another sleaze? Don't be ridiculous." "Of course not. I've been working for you for over 5 years now, and in all that time, you've never once flirted with me. Consider what brought us here. Love." "I pretty much gave you an open invitation. You made it clear that you'd never pursue a married woman, and you didn't. I offered, and you had the good sense not to refuse. If anything, I'll be the one to end it. I can assure you of that. If it does happen, it won't be anytime soon." "Do we have time for one more before I have to take you home?" She grinned, and we drove off. As I retired Sunday night, I felt like one of the happiest men in the state, maybe even the neighborhood. On my Monday commute to work, I reflected on my relationship with Myra and realized it couldn't continue, at least not in the same manner as over the weekend. I was suing Lois for infidelity, and if she hired a competent lawyer, one of their first moves would be to find something on me to use as leverage. If I got caught with Myra, Lois could counter, but I wasn't willing to go without her for the duration of the divorce proceedings. I had already endured enough deprivation while married to my unfaithful wife. Upon arriving at work, I summoned Myra to my office, explaining the dilemma and seeking her input. "I have a couple of ideas, but I'm not sure if they're feasible," she began. "Tell me, and let's see," I encouraged. "You have 3 uncomfortable customer chairs here. You need to replace them with a comfortable couch so visitors can sit comfortably," she proposed. "I can arrange that," I agreed. "Then you often stay late at work, so naturally I'll need to stay late to assist you. After we install the new couch, you'll leave, and I'll wait for 10 or 15 minutes to allow anyone watching you to follow, ensuring they won't see me leave," she suggested. "That should work," I concluded. "Here's another option. I'll leave for lunch. Before you head to the hotel, book a room and call me with the room number. Upon arrival, take the elevator to the 2nd floor where the conference rooms are, then use the stairs to reach the designated floor. However, we can't do this often. Attending too many conferences may arouse suspicion. To ensure I'm seen at a conference, hang a Do Not Disturb sign on one of the conference room doors before anyone arrives via the stairs. But ultimately, they'll need to witness us together. If we arrive and depart separately, we'll be fine." I instructed Myra to schedule the conference for the next day and then sent her off to work. With a busy day, I didn't get around to ordering the couch until around 4. Without waiting for approval, I ordered and paid for it myself. At 5, I called Myra into my office and informed her she needed to inform her husband that she would be working late on Thursday. "The couch will be delivered around noon." "How did you arrange everything with Ahern and accounting so quickly?" she inquired. "I handled it myself. No need to involve them," I replied. Seeing no one around, Myra kissed me as the door to the office was open. Then she remarked, I was hoping we wouldn't have to wait until Thursday. Don't forget about tomorrow's conference with the Ajax guys, I reminded her. Shoot! How did I forget? She exclaimed. Despite the encounter with Lois parked in the driveway when I arrived home, I remained in good spirits until I spotted her. Positioning her car in the middle of the driveway prevented me from accessing the garage. To allow her to leave, I parked accordingly. As I stepped out of my car, she approached me, stating, We need to talk, Dave. Things are escalating. I brushed past her, heading to her car. Opening the door, I reached for her purse, tipping its contents onto the seat. After counting the money and pocketing it, I tossed the purse back atop the pile. You still owe me $14 for the broken window. We have nothing more to discuss, I asserted. Dave, I love you, and I don't want a divorce. We can work through this. It doesn't have to end, Lois pleaded. No, Lois, there's no way we can salvage this, especially after learning you betrayed me before we even married. It's over between us, I declared. Lois was deflated. I had hoped you'd see reason, but I knew deep down you wouldn't. If you're set on divorce, I'll fight you. I won't accept infidelity. I know the laws here, and I won't settle for a 70-30 property split, she warned. I'm sorry you won't hold yourself accountable for what you did to me, but infidelity remains a fact. You'll have to prove it, Dave, and you can't. It'll be your word against mine, and I'll deny it vehemently. I'll claim you're attempting to swindle me out of my fair share of our property. You might even face consequences for it. You seem to forget I have visual evidence of your infidelity with my cousin. No, Dave, I haven't forgotten. I grabbed that tape as I left the house and promptly destroyed it. It's your word against mine, and without proof, you'll lose. You destroyed it. Ralph will never forgive you. He needed that tape desperately. He might even lose interest in you for destroying it. Can you grasp that I don't care about Ralph? Yes, I desired what he offered, but I don't require it. I need you. I shrugged, stating, You still owe me $14 for the window, then distanced myself from her and entered the house. She persisted relentlessly. She pounded on the door and rang the bell for a solid 10 minutes before finally departing. Watching her retreat down the driveway, I smirked. Clearly, she destroyed the tape without verifying its contents. A surprise awaited her. I wanted her to engage a lawyer and contest the divorce. I desired her to accrue debt, spend thousands on legal fees, only to discover I still possessed the tape, rendering her expenditures futile. I slept peacefully that night. My Tuesday conference call with the Ajax representatives went smoothly, leaving me in high spirits upon returning home from work. Wednesday wasn't too shabby either, especially when Myra suggested a quick encounter on my desk at day's end. After ensuring everyone had left, I acquiesced. Upon completion, I reminded her of her late shift on Thursday. En route home, I opted to stop by Landing Strip Lounge, my favorite restaurant. Unbeknownst to me, it was hosting an open mic night, making it a challenge to find a vacant seat. Eventually, I secured a spot at the bar. I happened to be present when Bobby Denton passed the microphone to a trailer repair mechanic employed by Triple T Sales and Service in Franktown. This individual was quite intelligent, holding degrees in both electrical and mechanical engineering. One day, while driving home, he heard a radio commercial that struck him as a blatant falsehood. Contemplating this, he sketched a plan for a lying robot upon returning home. After refining his blueprint, he constructed the robot in his basement workshop over a span of 6 weeks. When completed, he tested it in his living room, coincidentally when his 14-year-old son arrived home 2 hours tardy. Inquiring about the delay, the man's son claimed he had lost track of time while playing cards with friends. With a lull in the proceedings, I finished my beer and departed for home. The following day brought 2 positive developments. Firstly, my lawyer informed me that Lois's legal counsel had reached out, indicating her intent to contest the divorce. This news brought a smile to my face. Secondly, my black leather couch was delivered. Opting for leather was strategic, anticipating the inevitable stains it would endure. This foresight proved beneficial as Myra and I left a few stains on it later that afternoon. The subsequent weeks flew by, marked by frequent encounters with Myra, mostly on the couch after work. However, on 3 occasions, we utilized the conference room, acknowledging the superior comfort of the bed over the couch. During this period, Lois called me almost daily, expressing her need for me and insisting that I couldn't prevail. She suggested we accept the past, move forward together, and forget everything. Although I could have ended these calls by changing my phone numbers, I derived a perverse satisfaction from informing her she was wasting her time. Meanwhile, Ellsworth and Lois's lawyer were occupied with legal matters. I hoped Myra's lawyer billed by the hour, as I had negotiated a flat fee with Ellsworth, indifferent to the duration of the proceedings. Ellsworth was aware of the tape's existence, yet he never disclosed it to Lois's attorney. They negotiated with the other attorney, proposing that if I changed the grounds for divorce from infidelity to irreconcilable differences and agreed to an equal property division, Lois would cease her resistance. I instructed Ellsworth to decrease the split from 70/30ths to 65/35ths, knowing she wouldn't accept. Ellsworth informed me that he must notify the opposing party about the tapes before presenting them to the judge, as failing to settle beforehand would anger the judge. I authorized Ellsworth to use his discretion, as that was what I was compensating him for, right? It seemed Lois had someone tailing me, or at least that was my suspicion. I suddenly noticed a stranger nearby, seemingly appearing wherever I went. It might have been my paranoia, but then again, maybe not. Another week elapsed, and Ellsworth called. Lois and her attorney wished to meet. I instructed him to arrange it and inform me of the time. He later notified me, Friday at 10 in the morning. I arrived early at 9:30 and discussed matters with Bert. We decided to have the tape present at the meeting, but I wanted to toy with Lois one last time. The meeting commenced with the usual banter. Lois denied the infidelity accusations, claiming I was being unreasonable. Then I interjected, reminding her of the tape she and my cousin made. "No, I don't," she retorted confidently, aware of the lack of evidence to support my claim. "I'll make you a deal, Lois. If you sign the papers now, I'll agree to a 60-40 split. But you have only 2 minutes to decide. If not, I'll leave it to the judge." "I won't agree, Dave. You have no proof," Lois replied stubbornly. "Sure, Lois, I have a tape of you and Ralph," I stated confidently, anticipating her reaction. And just as I hoped, she became enraged, blurting out, "Damn it, Dave, I already told you I destroyed the damn tape." "Oh, so you admit to infidelity and destroying evidence?" I remarked, watching her eyes widen in realization. "No, that's not what I meant," she backtracked. "Never mind, Lois, I offered leniency, but your stubbornness, as usual, led you to reject it. Let the courts decide." Lois's lawyer then interjected, "If you indeed possess evidence, you better reveal it now." I gestured to Ellsworth, and as he moved to press the play button on the TV VCR positioned at the table's end, I stated firmly, "This is your final opportunity, Lois. I'm willing to settle for a 60-40 split, but once he presses play, the offer is rescinded and we proceed to court. Screw you, Dave. You've got nothing on me." With that, Bert pressed play, and I rose, declaring, "See you in court, Lois," before exiting the room. Before I even left the building, my phone rang. It was Bert. "They're interested in making a deal." "No thanks. I offered her an out, but she refused, so full steam ahead." My actions only escalated Lois's phone calls. I disconnected the house phone, and Myra knew not to pass on Lois's calls to me, leaving my cell phone as the only means of contact. I kept the same number to toy with Lois, finding amusement in the numerous unanswered calls from her. As for my personal life, Myra was providing more than enough excitement. 3 days after the meeting with Lois and the attorneys, Myra approached me saying, "We've got a problem, a major one." I panicked, fearing her husband had discovered our affair. "How serious is it?" I inquired. "Pretty serious. Harold needs to fly back to Ohio for some issues regarding his parents' inheritance. He'll be gone for a week." "So, what's the dilemma? How do we manage a week together?" I pondered for a moment before suggesting, "Simple. You leave work half an hour before me, drive to my place, park a block away, ensure all curtains are shut tight, and when I return home, we'll have our time. In the mornings, I'll leave for work, potentially drawing any pursuers with me. After waiting a brief period to ensure I'm in the clear, you'll head to work. We'll repeat this until the weekend, when we'll devise another plan. What about a weekend plan like this? I keep up the routine, but on Friday evening when you return home, we stay indoors the entire weekend. Do you think you can handle spending 2.5 days with me?" "What I'm unsure of, dear, is whether I can survive 2.5 days with you. We won't know until we try." So we went through with our plan, and I made it through the weekend. However, once it was over, I found myself feeling a bit down, especially when Myra returned home to reunite with her husband. I had grown accustomed to Myra's presence. She provided good company, and we got along well. Yet, deep down, I knew that once my divorce was finalized, I would be seeking a replacement for Lois. I valued the idea of marriage and longed for a fulfilling relationship where I could fall asleep in the arms of a loving partner who would be there in the morning. While I could envision having that with Myra, she never explicitly indicated that she would leave Harold. I sensed that she was content with him, aside from his occasional mistreatment, and was prepared to remain with him as long as she could reciprocate. Recalling the list that had ignited our affair, I mentally reviewed it. There were 3 men on that list, none of whom seemed suitable to be my spouse. 2 of them smoked, a habit I detested due to growing up in a household where both my parents were heavy smokers. Liz, from accounting, the only non-smoker among them, was indeed attractive, but I considered her too young for me. Our age gap suggested we might lack sufficient common ground. A brief encounter in her office, where she was listening to rap music, a genre I disliked, reinforced this belief. While entertaining the idea of a fling with Liz might be tempting, I doubted we could sustain a lasting relationship. These reflections occupied my mind during my Monday morning commute. Once at work, I found myself swamped with tasks, too preoccupied to dwell on personal matters. In fact, I was so occupied that I had to decline when Myra popped her head into my office asking if we were going to lunch. Right before I wrapped up my workday, Bert Ellsworth called. He mentioned that Lois was eager to resolve the matter. I understand your stance on bargaining, but offering her a 60/40ths deal to sign immediately might be wise. Infidelity typically influences asset distribution, but with 2 out of 7 divorce judges being women, they often lean towards a 50-50 split, regardless of grounds. We might end up with one of those judges. Settling now could be in your best interest. After about 30 seconds of contemplation, I instructed him to propose a 65-35 TRSS deal and gauge her response. During the downtime, Myra entered my office, requesting some time on the couch since she missed her extended lunch break. I granted her request. The following morning at 10 o'clock, Ellsworth called to report that Lois had agreed to the 65-35 offer. He mentioned she would arrive on Wednesday at 5 to sign the papers and requested a brief meeting with me. Although I saw little purpose in it beyond giving me another chance to confront her, I wanted to conclude matters swiftly to avoid further inconvenience to Myra. I informed Bert that I'd be available at 2 o'clock to accommodate her request. We convened in the conference room, and I took a seat, waiting for her to speak her piece. Recognizing my silence, she took a deep breath and expressed, "I don't want this, Dave. I know you may doubt it, but I love you. Perhaps we can find a way to reconcile and stay together." "Absolutely not, Lois. Not after discovering the extent of your infidelity. Let me be frank. If it were a fleeting affair, I might consider reconciliation. Suppose you had a series of regrettable encounters before our marriage, followed by years of fidelity until one resurfaced, leading to a brief affair. I might have been able to forgive that, but a long-standing affair before we even committed to each other? No chance whatsoever. Lois, there's no resolving this. You lavish love on the man you claim to barely like, while the one you profess to love can go weeks to months without it. It's futile, Lois. It just is. Is that all? Can't you please give us a chance, Dave? I can't, Lois. I'll never trust you again, and I refuse to live like this. I rose and made my way to the door. Pausing, I added, "You're an attractive woman, Lois, so I doubt you'll be single for long. If you find someone, I hope he treats you as poorly as you've treated me." With that, I exited the room and headed to the landing strip. Taking a seat at the bar, Karen served me a PBR and asked, "Where have you been, handsome?" "Dealing with a divorce and not in a very social mood," I replied. "I'd stop in for a beer or 2 and unwind." "So, does that mean I'll have a chance to charm you now?" she teased. "I thought you were content with your boyfriend all these years." "Ha, I was, until I realized he wasn't what I thought." Deciding I'd had enough, I signaled for the bill. As Karen returned with my change, she flashed a smile and said, "When your divorce is finalized, don't forget about me, all right?" "I can manage that. Take care," I replied, leaving in high spirits. Karen's interest in me was unexpected. Once Lois signed the papers, it was all settled. Despite awaiting the final decision, I felt liberated, free from the fear of being watched. Myra and I could abandon our clandestine meetings. Around 10, she entered my office asking about lunch plans. "Yes, I'll leave around 11:20 and book a room," I informed her. However, she responded, "That won't be necessary anymore. Lois signed the papers yesterday, so we don't need to worry about avoiding something that might not have happened." At 11:30, we left for the Marriott. As the door to room 403 shut behind us, we leaped onto the bed. While we dressed, Myra posed a question. "What now?" "What do you mean?" I countered. "I mean, now that you're free." This took me by surprise, but I quickly formulated a response. As long as you want me, honey, I'll stick around. But eventually, I'll seek a wife. I enjoyed being married. What qualities would you seek in a wife? She should be attractive, love me, have the strength to tolerate me, and be a decent cook. I can cook, she offered. I paused, realizing her true intention. In response, I stated, if you meet the criteria, I'll prioritize your application. But there's a catch. I won't engage in bigamy. She looked puzzled for a moment until it clicked. She beamed. Don't worry, love. Harold's days are numbered. Then, a concern crossed my mind, evident in my changed expression. Myra noticed and inquired, What's wrong, kid? What's on your mind? We've reached a point where we don't need to hide things from Lois, but now we have to conceal matters from Harold while you navigate your divorce proceedings. I may be mistaken, but I doubt it's necessary. I'll present him with a choice: infidelity or irreconcilable differences. I possess ample evidence of his infidelity. If I threaten to expose him, he'll likely opt for irreconcilable differences to protect his career aspirations. Harold aspires to climb the corporate ladder, aiming for a vice presidential role. However, the CEO and several board members are devout Christians. His chances may diminish if his affairs come to light. While it might inconvenience me for a week or two in a motel, we can handle that, can't we? Myra's strategy unfolded as planned, and she wasted no time executing it. Following my suggestion, she arranged a meeting with Ellsworth for Friday. She requested Bert to draft 2 sets of documents, one citing infidelity and the other irreconcilable differences. Just before the bank closed on Saturday at 11:45, she withdrew half of the checking account, all her savings, and 4 of the 6 CDs from the safe deposit box. Returning home, she gathered Harold's belongings he had left in pursuit of gold, loaded them into her car, and checked into a motel. By 3 o'clock, she returned, prepared dinner, uncorked a bottle of wine, and while dining with Harold, revealed her awareness of his affairs, backed by PI reports on 3 of them. She asserted she had reached her breaking point and intended to divorce him. She detailed her financial actions, offering to relinquish her share of the house, which exceeded her bank loan. Presenting him with divorce papers, she outlined his options and set a deadline of 10 o'clock Monday morning for his decision. Departing with a smile, she left the dirty dishes for Harold. As anticipated, Harold phoned her on her cell, opting for irreconcilable differences. On Wednesday, they convened in Bert's office, where Harold signed the documents. Myra opted to remain at the motel over the weekend to let the situation settle. Later, she moved in with me, and we planned to cohabit until our divorces were finalized, then wed. However, this posed a dilemma. Myra excelled in her role and wished to retain her job. Yet, our company prohibited relatives from working together. While we could both stay, one of us would need to relocate. Unfortunately, the nearest facility for transfer was 90 miles away, impractical for us. Hence, we decided to conceal our marriage. Myra retained her surname, preserving her health insurance until, if ever, we were discovered. And then Myra would resign and seek another job if she desired. She didn't really need to work, considering my substantial compensation. She checked out of the motel on Sunday and moved in with me by 3 p.m. The following 2 months passed swiftly without incident, and I began to unwind and lower my defenses. A significant error. Lois called once or twice a week, and I typically answered to dismiss her, deriving satisfaction from doing so. I should have anticipated her persistence. On a Wednesday evening, Myra and I were at the landing strip, enjoying a drink or 3. We frequented the place occasionally, not necessarily on Wednesdays, as it had always been my preferred spot. However, we were there that night to support one of the accounting girls, trying her hand at performing. We applauded Shelley's effort, but both Myra and I agreed she was better suited to her job than show business. Her routine began with a scenario where a man engrossed in reading the newspaper gets struck on the head by his wife with a frying pan. "Why did you do that?" he inquired. "For the paper I found in your pocket with Jenny's name," she retorted. He explained that Jenny was the name of a horse he bet on at the races. Apologizing, she resumed her chores. Days later, as the man watched TV, his wife punched him again, this time with a larger pan, causing him to lose consciousness. Upon awakening, he asked why. "Your horse was calling," she quipped. After some laughter, the storyteller continued. An elderly couple, despite mutual disdain, remained married for years. Their arguments often resounded late into the night, with the old man threatening to haunt his wife after pass away, which frightened the neighbors, who suspected him of practicing black magic due to odd incidents. Upon his demise from a heart attack at 85, his funeral featured a closed casket. At the burial, neighbors expressed concern to his widow about his potential return. She scoffed, asserting she'd buried him upside down, confident he wouldn't ask for directions upon resurrection. "You keep your damn hands off my man, you damn strumpet!" Lois's voice cut through the air, dripping with venom. I whirled around to see her pouring a drink over Myra's head. Before I could react, Myra retaliated, splashing her own drink into Lois's face. Lois stumbled to the floor, and I wasted no time grabbing Myra and pulling her out of there. As I started drying us off with some rags from my trunk, Lois stumbled out of the door, her footing unsteady from a blow to her nose. And who was there to help her? None other than my prick cousin Ralph. I dropped the rags and yelled, "You rotten son of a cow!" and launched myself at him. He let go of Lois, who collapsed, and then he bolted. I chased him for 3 blocks before giving up and heading back to the strip parking lot. When I returned, I found Myra pinning Lois against the car's fender. Myra was screaming at her, "Get it into your stupid head, you stupid cow." "I didn't steal it from you. You threw it away, and I was lucky enough to catch it." As I approached, Myra backed away and said, "Let's get out of here. Get in the car. I need to go inside and straighten things out with Joe." I found him inside, and he assured me there was no damage. He even joked, "Next time do it during intermission so the customers have something to look at when no one is on the mic." Back outside, I saw Lois waiting for me at the entrance, but Myra was already in the car. Lois stepped towards me, pleading, "Please, Dave, give up the divorce. I'm dying, baby. I need you. I love you, and I know we can work this out." "You must be the stupidest human being on the planet, Lois," I said, shaking my head in disbelief. "Here you are, professing your love for me while your current date is the reason behind your divorce. And to top it off, you're not even discreet about it. You need to let it go, Lois. The only feelings I have for you are hate and disgust. Leave me alone." With that, I walked around her, got into my car, and drove away. Both divorces were finalized. I proposed to Myra, but she surprised me by saying, "Ask me again in a year, baby. Let's see if we're truly right for each other after living together for a while." I waited a year and proposed again, and this time she said yes. We opted for a civil ceremony at the Justice of the Peace, as we didn't want another big wedding. Lois ended up marrying Ralph, but their marriage didn't last long. It turned out Ralph had been cheating on her with several other women, one of whom gave him a disease that he passed on to Lois. While cheating on me seemed acceptable to her, being cheated on was a different story entirely. She couldn't tolerate it. 6 years after my marriage to Myra, Ralph made the mistake of attending a wedding that I also happened to be at. I kept my long-standing promise to him. It may be a while before I receive another invitation to a family celebration.
It all began on a late afternoon as I was driving home from my parents' house. I had been there for several weeks, helping to finish a long-overdue renovation project. It was hard work, but satisfying in its own way. My hands were still sore from handling tools, and my mind was on getting home, having a hot meal, and finally putting my feet up. As I approached the driveway, something felt off. The usual calm of the neighborhood was replaced with faint sounds of chaos coming from inside my house. It wasn't clear what was going on, but it wasn't normal. I parked the car and stepped out, my senses heightened. As I entered the house, the noises became more distinct, thuds, scraping, and something that sounded like distant yelling. My first instinct was to ensure safety. I quickly moved to the drawer where I kept my pistol. A cautious man by nature, I believed in being prepared. With the gun firmly in hand, I took deliberate steps into the living room. What I saw there stopped me in my tracks. The place looked like a storm had passed through it. Furniture was pushed aside, wallpaper peeled off in strips, and the usual orderliness I maintained was completely gone. For a moment, I thought the house had been ransacked. "What is going on here?" I called out, my voice steady but firm. My wife appeared from the kitchen, looking oddly composed despite the destruction around her. She didn't seem alarmed at all, which was even more confusing. "There's a problem we need to fix," she began, as if this explanation would suffice. I lowered the pistol, still scanning the room. She pointed at the walls, gesturing to the torn wallpaper and scratched surfaces. "The house is in terrible shape," she said. I decided it's time for a full renovation. Her tone was matter-of-fact, like she was talking about rearranging furniture, not tearing apart the entire house. You decided? I asked, my disbelief evident. I just spent weeks finishing up a renovation at my parents' place, and now you're telling me I'm walking into another project. She nodded enthusiastically, as if this was exciting news. But this isn't simple, I continued. A renovation like this takes planning, money, and a proper team. It's not something I can just throw together on my own. Relax, she said, brushing off my concerns. I've already thought this through. We're meeting someone tomorrow who can handle everything. Her confidence was unsettling. I'm a man who believes in doing things right, not rushing into decisions. Who exactly are we meeting? I asked, my skepticism clear. A friend of mine. Her husband is a professional. He handles renovations, designs, projects, the whole package, she explained. Is he an engineer? Does he have a team? I pressed, trying to gauge how legitimate this sounded. She rolled her eyes slightly, as if my questioning was unnecessary. Yes, he has a team. He's done incredible work on my friend's house. You'll see for yourself. Don't worry about the details, they're all sorted. I wasn't entirely convinced. Renovations weren't just about skill, they were about trust and accountability. But she seemed adamant. Tomorrow is your day off, isn't it? She continued, shifting the conversation back to logistics. We're meeting them first thing. It's an important meeting, so I need you to make a good impression. She said this with a sense of finality, as if the decision had already been made and my role was merely to follow through. I stared at the mess around me, feeling a mix of frustration and resignation. Whatever she had planned, it seemed I had little choice but to go along with it. At the very least, I'd see what this so-called professional had to offer. The next morning, we set off early, heading to a small town where my wife's friend lived. It was an unusually long drive, made worse by my growing apprehension. She had mentioned this friend before, though not in the most flattering terms. The woman had a reputation for being unreliable, someone who jumped from one relationship to another and didn't hesitate to throw others under the bus when it suited her. It baffled me why my wife thought it was a good idea to involve her in something as significant as our home renovation. When we arrived, the house was modest but well maintained. My wife rang the doorbell, and within moments, the door swung open. I recognized the woman instantly. She hadn't changed much since the last time I saw her, though there was something oddly subdued about her demeanor. Gone was the brazen attitude I remembered. She greeted us warmly, even cheerfully, as if she hadn't spent years cultivating a reputation for being difficult. My wife nudged me to step inside, though I hesitated, shooting her a look that said everything I was thinking. She's different now, my wife whispered, rolling her eyes at my reluctance. I followed her inside, still skeptical. The woman led us to the living room, offering us coffee and asking us to make ourselves comfortable. It was bizarre. The last time I'd seen her, she wouldn't have thought twice about dismissing someone outright. Now, she was practically the picture of hospitality. I sat down but didn't relax, keeping my guard up. I wasn't about to let my past impressions cloud my judgment entirely, but I wasn't convinced of her supposed transformation either. As we waited, I turned to my wife. Are you sure you want to trust her? She's not exactly known for reliability, I said quietly. My wife sighed, clearly exasperated. People change, she said. Ever since she got married, she's turned over a new leaf. Just wait and see. Her confidence annoyed me, but I decided to keep my thoughts to myself. It wasn't worth an argument, not yet, anyway. Soon after, her husband joined us. He was an imposing figure, tall and broad-shouldered, with an air of authority about him. He greeted us politely and introduced himself. Despite my reservations about his wife, I couldn't deny that he seemed competent and professional. We began discussing the renovation project, and my wife wasted no time outlining her vision. She spoke enthusiastically about transforming our home, her excitement evident in every word. I mostly listened, occasionally chiming in with practical concerns about costs and timelines. The man nodded along, taking notes and asking relevant questions. He seemed to know his stuff, which was reassuring. "I'll bring my team over on Sunday to take a look at the house," he said. "We'll evaluate the scope of work and give you a detailed plan afterward." His confidence was contagious, even if I still had my doubts about the whole arrangement. My wife beamed, clearly thrilled that things were moving forward. I remained reserved, unwilling to get too optimistic until I saw results. As the conversation wrapped up, he added a final note. "Just a heads up," he said. "My team is unique. They're young guys, full of energy, and sometimes their behavior can be a bit, let's say, unorthodox. If they say or do anything that seems out of line, don't take it personally. They're good at what they do, and that's what matters." I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. My wife seemed unbothered, nodding along as if it were a minor detail. We thanked them for their time and hospitality before heading back home. The drive felt shorter this time, but my mind was still racing. There were too many variables, too many unknowns. My wife, however, seemed perfectly at ease, already talking about how great everything would turn out. I kept my thoughts to myself, deciding to wait and see how Sunday's visit would unfold. The last day of my weekend began earlier than expected. I woke up to the sound of my wife tearing down wallpaper in the living room. She had been at it since dawn, the noise of ripping paper echoing through the house. Groaning, I rolled out of bed and realized I hadn't even had time to wash up when there was a sharp knock at the door. Still in my boxers, I quickly threw on some clothes and went to see who it was. What greeted me was nothing short of a spectacle. Standing on my porch was a group of young men, looking more like they belonged on a runway than at a renovation site. One of them, dressed in a beige designer suit, seemed to be the self-proclaimed leader. Behind him was a mix of casually dressed guys, each carrying an air of nonchalance. Before I could even get a word in, they barged in, their voices filling the space with loud chatter and crude jokes. Some of their remarks were directed at the state of the house, others at the torn wallpaper. It was enough to make my blood boil. "Hey, keep it professional," I snapped at one of them who had gone too far. My voice was firm, leaving no room for argument. The leader quickly stepped in, apologizing on behalf of the group. "Don't mind them," he said with a sheepish smile. "They're just excited to get started." I didn't buy the excuse but decided not to escalate things further. Instead, I crossed my arms and waited for them to begin their assessment. The team spread out, examining every corner of the house with surprising efficiency. Despite their initial behavior, it was clear they knew what they were doing. My wife joined them, eagerly pointing out areas she wanted renovated. "Don't forget to check the basement," she said, her enthusiasm borderline contagious. I frowned. "Why the basement?" I asked. "It's just a storage space for junk." "What's the point?" She waved me off with a vague explanation about having special plans for the area, promising to share the details later. I didn't press her but made a mental note to follow up. As the group moved downstairs, I stayed close behind, observing their every move. The basement, like I said, was cluttered with old boxes and forgotten items. Yet, the team seemed unfazed. They measured walls, checked the flooring, and even discussed potential layouts among themselves. Their professionalism in this moment was a stark contrast to their earlier antics. Still, I couldn't ignore the hushed conversations and occasional glances they exchanged. Something about it felt off, but I chose to let it slide for now. After thoroughly inspecting the house, they regrouped in the living room to discuss their findings. The leader presented their estimate, and I was genuinely surprised. The cost was far lower than I had anticipated. "Why so affordable?" I asked, skeptical of the offer. "We're not overhauling the structure," he explained. "It's mostly cosmetic work, plus a few furniture upgrades. Nothing too complicated." His reasoning made sense, but I remained cautious. My wife, however, seemed thrilled. She nodded enthusiastically, agreeing to their terms without hesitation. Before we wrapped up, the leader added one final detail. "Usually, we take payment upfront," he said. "But since your wife is a friend of my wife, we'll handle the legalities and payments after the work is completed. Does that work for you?" His offer was unexpected but intriguing. The idea of paying only after seeing results was appealing. It showed confidence in their ability to deliver, which I respected. After a brief pause, I extended my hand. "All right," I said. "You've got a deal." After that day, the renovation work began in earnest. Each morning, I left for work as usual, while my wife stayed home to oversee the progress. The team of builders arrived promptly and got to work, their noisy presence a constant reminder that the house was undergoing a transformation. Days turned into weeks, and I could see changes taking shape. The living room looked brighter, the kitchen more modern, and even the upstairs bedrooms began to feel refreshed. My wife seemed to thrive in her role as the on-site manager, keeping everything on schedule and making sure the workers stuck to the plan. One evening, I came home exhausted from a long day at the office. The house was quieter than usual. The workers had already packed up and left for the day, leaving behind a faint scent of sawdust and fresh paint. As I walked through the house, I couldn't help but notice how much progress had been made. However, my thoughts kept circling back to one thing: the basement. I had completely forgotten about my wife's earlier mention of wanting to renovate it. It wasn't until I saw a stack of materials by the basement door that I remembered. Curious, I called out to her. She appeared moments later, still holding a clipboard filled with notes. "What's the deal with the basement?" I asked. "Why are we even bothering with it? It's just a place for storing junk." She smiled, clearly anticipating the question. "I've got big plans for that space," she said, her voice filled with excitement. "Think about it, we've been using it as a dumping ground, but it has so much potential. I want to turn it into a special area, something unique." I raised an eyebrow. "Special how?" She launched into a description of her vision, painting a picture of cozy furniture, an enormous bookshelf, and mood lighting in rich, warm tones. "It'll be a perfect retreat," she said. "A place where we can relax, read, or even entertain guests." It sounded ambitious, almost too ambitious. "And you're sure this is worth the effort?" I asked. She nodded confidently. "Absolutely. But to make it happen, I need to take care of a few details with someone who's helping me finalize the design." That caught my attention. "Who are you meeting?" I asked, narrowing my eyes slightly. "Just someone who's helping me bring the idea to life," she replied vaguely. "Don't worry about it. It's all under control." Her nonchalant attitude didn't sit entirely well with me, but I decided not to push. She had been managing the project competently so far, and I didn't want to micromanage. "So, when do I get to see this masterpiece?" I joked, trying to lighten the mood. She laughed. "Soon enough," she said. "But for now, I need you to handle something important. Tomorrow, the builders will be back to start working on the basement. I have a meeting in the afternoon and might be late. Can you keep an eye on things while I'm gone?" I hesitated for a moment, considering her request. Supervising the workers wasn't exactly how I wanted to spend my evening, but it seemed reasonable enough. "All right," I said. "I'll make sure everything runs smoothly." She gave me a quick kiss on the cheek before heading back to her notes. That night, as I sat in the living room, I couldn't help but think about the project. The house was shaping up nicely, and while I had my reservations about the basement, I trusted her judgment. For now, my focus was on making sure the workers did their job properly. Whatever she had planned for the space, I'd find out soon enough. The next day, I got up early, ready to take on the task. As my wife prepared to leave for her meeting, she reminded me once again. "Keep an eye on them," she said. "They're good, but they need supervision." I nodded, determined to do my part. Whatever her grand vision for the basement was, I'd make sure it started on the right foot. The next day, I arrived home after a long shift at work. The house was quiet, just as my wife had warned me it would be. She was out, and the builders had already arrived to continue their work on the basement. As I stepped inside, I could hear voices from downstairs. At first, I thought nothing of it, just the usual noise of people talking on the job. But then, I caught fragments of their conversation, and what I heard made my blood run cold. They weren't discussing work. Their words were vulgar and laced with inappropriate remarks about my wife. The kind of talk that no man would tolerate about someone he cared for. At that moment, any sense of patience I had left evaporated. Without hesitation, I made my way downstairs. The group fell silent as I entered, clearly caught off guard by my sudden presence. I walked straight up to one of them, a young guy with a cocky demeanor who seemed to be the ringleader of their crude jokes. Grabbing him by the collar, I lifted him just enough to make my point clear. "You want to repeat that?" I asked, my voice steady but filled with unmistakable anger. His face went pale, and he stammered, "Man, you must have misheard. We weren't talking about your wife. It's just someone with the same name, that's all." I let him go, but my glare lingered. "Watch your mouth," I said firmly. "Next time, there won't be a warning." The room was tense as I turned and walked away. I didn't need to say more, they got the message. As I headed back upstairs, I could feel their eyes on me, but I didn't care. Respect was non-negotiable. Later that evening, my wife returned home, looking as cheerful as ever. She immediately began talking about the progress the builders had made, oblivious to the confrontation that had taken place earlier. I interrupted her to explain what had happened, recounting the incident in detail. Her reaction was a mix of frustration and exasperation. "Why is it that every time I leave you alone, you end up in some kind of standoff?" she asked, rolling her eyes. "And what was I supposed to do?" I shot back. "Let them talk like that without consequence." She sighed. "No, but maybe next time, handle it a bit more diplomatically. We still need these guys to finish the job. The last thing I want is for them to sabotage the work out of spite." I understood her point, but I wasn't about to apologize for defending her honor. "Fine," I said, "but they're on thin ice as far as I'm concerned." After dinner, she changed the subject, her tone lightening as she shared some news. "By the way," she said, "I spoke to the husband of my friend earlier. He mentioned the incident and asked if everything was okay. I assured him it's under control, but it looks like the builders might have said something to him, too." I wasn't surprised. Gossip traveled fast in situations like these. Still, I was glad the matter hadn't escalated further. Before heading to bed, she mentioned another update about the project. "So, there's someone coming in a few days," she began. "He's going to help with a graphic visualization of what the basement will look like. Apparently, he's an expert, but also unique." She gave me a knowing look, as if preparing me for someone eccentric. "Just a heads up so you're not caught off guard." I nodded, taking her words in stride. At this point, nothing about this renovation could surprise me. "All right," I said. "Let's see what this guy has to offer." Another weekend rolled around, and I was at home trying to catch up on some much-needed rest. My wife had been out for most of the morning, running errands for the renovation project. When she finally returned, she wasn't alone. She walked in with a man who, to put it mildly, was unlike anyone I'd ever seen. He was covered in tattoos, with piercings in places I didn't even think were possible. His style was loud, almost deliberately provocative, and it immediately set the tone for what was going to be a very unusual interaction. The man introduced himself with an overly casual demeanor, extending a hand as if we'd been friends for years. "Your wife's told me about the basement project," he said, his voice dripping with enthusiasm. "So, have you heard the full plan yet?" I shook his hand reluctantly and replied, "Not entirely." My wife stood nearby, watching with a mix of amusement and anticipation as he led the way down to the basement. Once downstairs, he pulled out a high-end tablet and began taking pictures of the space from every angle. His movements were quick and efficient, clearly practiced. "All right, let me show you what I've got in mind," he said, pulling up a digital sketchpad on the screen. Within minutes, he he had drawn a detailed layout of the room. He pointed to one corner. "Here, we'll install a custom-designed intimate chair." Then, moving to the opposite side, he added, "And over here, a large crossfall, well, you get the idea." I froze, staring at him in disbelief. "Stop," I said, cutting him off. "What is this supposed to be?" He looked at me as if I'd just asked a silly question. "It's an intimate space," he said matter-of-factly. "Your wife was very clear about wanting something unique, something liberating." His explanation didn't help. If anything, it made things worse. I turned to my wife, who was standing silently, watching my reaction with a sheepish smile. "Is this true?" I asked her, trying to keep my composure. She shrugged. "Why not?" she said. "I thought it'd be something fun, something different. I'm doing this for us, you know. To spice things up a bit." Her nonchalant attitude only added to my frustration. "I thought this was supposed to be a cozy reading room," I said. "You know, bookshelves, a couch, something simple and comfortable. This is not what I had in mind." She stepped closer, her tone softening. "Look," she said. "You've been working so hard, and I just wanted to do something special for us. It's not like it's set in stone. If you really don't want it, we can rethink the design." Her attempt to pacify me was partially effective. I sighed, deciding it wasn't worth a fight. "Fine," I said. "But let's keep it reasonable. No surprises." The man wrapped up his presentation quickly after that, sensing the tension in the room. As he packed up his things, he complimented my wife on her vision and assured her the final design would be perfect. I wasn't convinced, but I kept my opinions to myself. As he left, my wife walked him to the door, thanking him for his time and effort. When she returned, she brought up another topic. "By the way," she said, "the lead builder wants to talk to you about something important. He's stopping by tomorrow. I'm not sure what it's about, but he said it's crucial." I raised an eyebrow, curious, but not overly concerned. "All right," I said. "We'll see what he has to say." It was another long day at work when I got home to find the lead builder waiting for me. His expression was serious, and I could tell right away that something wasn't right. "We need to talk," he said, stepping inside. Without wasting time, he laid it out plainly. The costs for the basement renovation had spiraled beyond the original estimate. "Your wife updated the project," he explained, "and it's a lot more extensive now. Unfortunately, this means the total cost is significantly higher than we initially discussed." He named the figure, and I stood there in stunned silence, trying to process the number. Before I could respond, my wife appeared in the doorway. Her face was a mix of worry and determination. She must have overheard the conversation because she immediately began pleading her case. "Look, I know it's more than we planned," she said, "but just think about how amazing it's going to be when it's finished. We're already halfway there. The living room and kitchen are practically done. This is the home we've always dreamed of." I raised a hand to stop her. "Let me think," I said firmly. Turning to the builder, I added, "Can we pause the construction for a couple of days? I need time to figure out how we're going to handle this." He nodded, understanding my position. "No problem," he said. "We'll hold off until you're ready." With that, he left, leaving me and my wife to sort through the mess. Once we were alone, she started again. "Please," she said, her voice soft and almost pleading. "I know it's a lot, but just imagine how beautiful it will be. This is for us, for our future. We've already come so far. If we stop now, all this work will be for nothing." I could see the hope in her eyes, but her words only added to my frustration. "You do realize," I said, "that I'm the one paying for all of this? It's my job that's funding your dream house, not yours." She didn't back down. If anything, she doubled down, painting a picture of how perfect everything would be once the renovations were complete. "You're always saying you want a comfortable home to come back to," she argued. "This is it. This is our chance to make that happen. Don't you think it's worth the extra effort? Her persistence was exhausting, but she wasn't wrong. The renovations were already underway, and stopping now would mean wasting all the time and money we'd already invested. That night, I stayed up late, running the numbers in my head and considering my options. By morning, I had made up my mind. If we were going to push forward with this, I needed a way to bring in more income to cover the additional costs. At work, I approached my supervisor to discuss opportunities for extra assignments or projects. To my surprise, he had an immediate suggestion. "There's a week-long business trip coming up," he said. "It's not glamorous, but the pay is triple the usual rate. If you're interested, it's yours." The decision wasn't difficult. A week away from home would be inconvenient, but the financial benefit was too good to pass up. "I'll take it," I said without hesitation. Arrangements were quickly made, and I left the office feeling a mix of relief and determination. At least now, I had a plan to tackle the mounting expenses. When I got home, I sat my wife down to explain the situation. "I found a way to make this work," I told her. "I'm taking on a short-term assignment that'll bring in the extra money we need. It means I'll be away for a week, but it'll cover the costs of the new project." Her face lit up with relief and excitement. "Thank you," she said, throwing her arms around me. "I promise you won't regret this." For the first time in days, I felt like we were finally moving in the right direction. The day finally came when the renovation team was scheduled to return to continue their work. I got home from the office later than usual, tired and ready to relax, but what greeted me left me both puzzled and annoyed. The builders were scattered around the house, some shirtless, others wearing shorts so short they might as well have been underwear. I stared for a moment, trying to make sense of the scene, before heading inside to find my wife. "What's going on?" I asked her, gesturing toward the half-dressed workers. She didn't seem fazed. "Oh, they said it's too hot to work in full clothes," she explained casually. "I told them it's fine as long as they're getting the job done." "What's the harm?" Her tone was light, almost dismissive, but it only made my discomfort grow. This wasn't the kind of environment I wanted in my home. I decided not to argue, though the situation nagged at me. It felt like one more thing in a growing list of oddities surrounding this renovation. Instead, I focused on what I needed to share with her. "By the way," I said, "I got confirmation about my work trip. I'll be leaving in a week and gone for about 4 days. She nodded, seemingly unbothered. "That's perfect timing," she said. "By then, the basement should be nearly finished. All that'll be left is installing the furniture." The week went by faster than I expected. The builders continued their work, and I busied myself preparing for the trip. On the day of my departure, I gave my wife a quick rundown of what she might need to handle while I was gone. She assured me everything would be fine, and I left, trying to push aside the lingering unease I felt about the project. For the first couple of days, things seemed normal enough. I checked in with her a few times, but our conversations were brief. She seemed distracted, and then, by the third day, she stopped answering her phone altogether. Initially, I chalked it up to her being busy with the builders or other errands. But by the evening, my frustration had turned into concern. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Then, as if on cue, my phone rang. It was my neighbor. "Hey," he said, his tone cautious. "I know you're out of town, but I thought you should know something. Your wife mentioned the renovation, right?" I confirmed, wondering where this was going. "Well," he continued, "I've noticed something odd. Usually, the workers leave in the evening, but for the past 3 nights, their trucks have been parked outside late into the night. I thought maybe they were just working overtime, but considering, the argument you had with them, I figured it's worth mentioning." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. My mind raced as I tried to process what he was saying. "You're sure about this?" I asked, my voice steady despite the rising anger. He assured me he was. "I'm not trying to cause trouble," he added, but it seemed strange. "I thought you'd want to know." After the call ended, I sat there in silence, my thoughts spiraling. Everything started to click: my wife's distracted behavior, the missed calls, and now this. It was too much to ignore. I needed to get back home and find out what was really going on. Without wasting a moment, I began planning how to cut my trip short and return earlier than expected. Whatever was happening, I wasn't going to sit idly by and let it continue unchecked. The next morning, my wife called me, her tone cheerful and upbeat. "The furniture has arrived," she said. "There's not much left to do now." I told her I'd be home a day or two later than expected, blaming work for the delay. "That's fine," she replied. "Everything should be finished by then." Her casual response didn't ease my growing suspicion, but I kept my thoughts to myself. The moment the call ended, I started making plans to return home earlier than she expected. I wrapped up my work commitments as quickly as possible and drove home that same evening. When I pulled up to the house, the builders' trucks were still parked outside. It was late, far past the usual hours they worked. My unease deepened as I stepped out of the car and walked toward the house. The front door was unlocked, so I let myself in, moving quietly through the entryway. Near the basement door, I noticed a strange puddle of liquid on the floor. It didn't look like water, and I couldn't immediately place what it was. My instincts told me to stay cautious. Slowly, I descended the basement stairs, careful not to make any noise. What I saw when I reached the bottom was beyond anything I could have imagined. My wife, along with the builders, was caught in an act that left no room for misinterpretation. For a moment, I simply stood there, frozen in shock. Then, I pulled out my phone and began recording. None of them noticed me, too engrossed in their actions to sense my presence. Once I had enough footage, I turned and walked back upstairs, my mind racing. Anger surged through me, but I forced myself to stay calm. Losing control wouldn't solve anything. Instead, I came up with a plan. I locked the basement door from the outside, securing it with the key. Then, I left the key in the lock, ensuring they couldn't open it from their side. For the next few hours, the house was eerily quiet. But eventually, the banging started. Fists pounded on the basement door, followed by muffled shouts. The door stuck, someone yelled. "What's going on?" Their panic grew as time passed. I sat in the living room, waiting, my mind already planning my next move. When the noise from the basement reached a fever pitch, I walked to the hallway and called out. "The door's not stuck," I said loudly enough for them to hear. "It's locked." "You're not going anywhere." Their protests grew louder, but I ignored them. Instead, I gathered all the clothes they had left in the living room and threw them into the garbage bin outside. They wouldn't be needing them anytime soon. The next day, after a full 24 hours of leaving them locked up, I called the police. "There are intruders in my house," I told the dispatcher. "I caught them in the act and locked them in the basement. Can you send someone over?" When the officers arrived, I unlocked the basement door and stepped aside as they entered. The builders and my wife scrambled out, looking disheveled and desperate. The builders immediately started shouting accusations. "He locked us in," one of them said. "We're the crew working on his house." "He's lying." I calmly countered their claims. "I just got back from a business trip," I explained to the officers. "If you don't believe me, you can confirm my alibi with my boss and my neighbor. They'll tell you when I returned." The officers made their calls, and my story checked out. Meanwhile, the builders fumbled, unable to produce any contract or documentation proving they had a legitimate reason to be in my house. By the end of the ordeal, the police escorted the builders off the property. My wife and I were left alone in the aftermath. She stood there, avoiding my gaze, knowing there was no way to explain or justify what had happened. The silence between us was deafening, and the weight of her betrayal hung heavy in the air. As soon as the police left and the door closed, the tension in the house reached its breaking point. My wife, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up. "How could you do that?" she demanded, her voice sharp and filled with anger. "Locking them in the basement? Calling the police? Do you even realize what you've done?" Her words were accusatory, as if she were the one who had been wronged. I didn't flinch. What I did? I shot back. You're questioning my actions when you're the one who betrayed me. Don't you dare try to turn this around. You have no right. My voice was steady, but my anger simmered beneath the surface. She opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off. No, I said firmly. You don't get to speak. Not after what you've done. She tried to defend herself, her tone becoming desperate. It wasn't what it looked like, she began, but I wasn't having it. Save it, I said coldly. I don't want your excuses. There's nothing you can say that will undo what I saw. Nothing. She fell silent, realizing that her words would carry no weight with me. Without another word, I walked past her and headed to the bedroom. I grabbed a suitcase and began pulling her clothes from the closet, tossing them in without care. What are you doing? She cried, following me. Stop. You can't just throw me out like this. Her voice rose in pitch, but I didn't stop. The betrayal was too fresh, too deep. There was no room for reconciliation in my mind. Watch me, I said bluntly, continuing to pack her belongings. She tried to grab the suitcase from me, but I pulled it away. You're leaving, I said, my tone leaving no room for argument. I'm not staying in this house with you for another second. You've crossed the line, and there's no coming back from this. She began to cry, not out of remorse but frustration. You don't have the right to do this, she screamed. This is my home too. I turned to face her, my expression hardened. No, I said. It's not. I paid for this house. I've spent months working my ass off to turn it into something we could both enjoy. And you've done nothing but betray that effort. So, no, you don't get to stay. She tried to argue, her words coming out in a jumbled mess of anger and desperation, but I wasn't listening anymore. I zipped up the suitcase and pushed it toward the door. Take it and go, I said firmly. You're not welcome here anymore. She stood there, stunned, as if she couldn't believe I was serious. But when I opened the door and stepped aside, the reality of the situation finally hit her. You'll regret this, she spat, her voice filled with venom. You can't just get rid of me like this. I'll fight you for everything. I shook my head. Do what you want, I said. But this marriage is over. You're getting out of my house, and you're not coming back. Now leave. Her protests continued, but they fell on deaf ears as I guided her out the door and closed it behind her. The silence that followed was deafening, but it was also a relief. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of control over my life again. A few days after everything had seemingly settled, the construction crew showed up at my doorstep. Their faces were a mix of smugness and feigned professionalism. We're here to talk about payment, the leader said, his tone carrying a hint of menace. You owe us for the work we've done. I stared at them for a moment, letting the silence stretch. Then, with a calm voice, I replied, You mean payment for betrayal? Sure, I've got something for you. Without waiting for a response, I walked into the house, grabbed the trash bin that had been sitting by the back door, and returned to the window overlooking where they stood. Their expressions changed to confusion as I hoisted the bin and dumped its contents out the window, letting garbage rain down on them. There's your payment, I said coldly. Now get off my property. Their shock quickly turned to anger. You'll regret this, one of them shouted, shaking his fist. You better watch your back. I didn't flinch. Instead, I closed the window and walked away, refusing to engage further. Their threats were empty words to me at that moment, but little did I know how far they'd be willing to go. Over the next few days, I focused on legal matters, consulting with my lawyer to ensure everything was in order. Divorce proceedings were already underway, and I wanted to make sure I was protected from any additional fallout from the renovation debacle. My lawyer assured me that I was on solid ground, especially since there were no formal contracts with the crew. But the builders weren't done. Late one night, my neighbor called me, sounding alarmed. "I think something's going on near your house," he said. "There's a couple of guys near your car with what looks like a gas can." My heart sank as I quickly checked the security feed on my phone. Sure enough, 2 figures were lurking near the driveway, their movement suspicious. I called the police immediately, explaining the situation. As I waited for them to arrive, I stayed inside, watching through the window as the men began dousing my car with gasoline. They were sloppy, their movements rushed and panicked. It was clear they had no experience with this kind of thing. Within minutes, the flashing lights of a police car illuminated the street, and the 2 men froze like deer caught in headlights. The officers apprehended them on the spot. As they were handcuffed and led away, I stepped outside to watch. One of the men tried to plead his case. "It wasn't what it looked like," he said, "but the evidence was clear. The gas can, the matches in his pocket, and the security footage I provided left no room for doubt." At the station, their stories fell apart quickly under questioning. What started as a petty act of revenge escalated into a serious charge. This time, there were no excuses, no loopholes to exploit. The police informed me that the men were being charged with attempted arson, a crime that carried significant consequences. Unlike their first brush with the law, this incident ensured they wouldn't be walking away so easily. The day of the divorce proceedings came faster than I had expected, but I was ready. Armed with undeniable evidence of her betrayal, the process was swift and decisive. The judge reviewed the documentation I provided, including the video footage and statements from witnesses, and ruled in my favor. My wife's arguments, weak and unconvincing, were dismissed without much consideration. By the end of the hearing, I walked out of the courtroom knowing that the chapter of my life with her was officially over. With the divorce finalized, I turned my focus back to the house. The renovations had been tainted by the events surrounding them, but I refused to let that ruin my plans. Calling on a few close friends, I decided to finish the work myself. Over the course of several weekends, we repainted the walls, fixed the remaining issues, and restored order to the home. It was hard work, but it felt good to reclaim the space on my own terms. The basement, however, required a different approach. I couldn't look at it without being reminded of everything that had happened. So, I stripped it bare, removing all traces of the so-called intimate space my wife had envisioned. Instead of turning it into anything elaborate, I decided to use it for storage. Old boxes, tools, and seasonal decorations now occupied the space. It wasn't glamorous, but it was practical, and more importantly, it was mine. One of the first changes I made after the divorce was to replace all the locks in the house. The property was legally mine, a fact that the court had affirmed during the proceedings. My wife hadn't contributed a single penny to the purchase or renovation of the home. It was my hard work that had paid for everything, and I wasn't about to let her have any claim to it now. Changing the locks felt symbolic, a way of closing the door on the past and securing a new beginning. Life slowly began to settle into a new normal. Without the constant drama and tension, I found peace in the small things. I took up hobbies I had neglected, spent more time with friends, and focused on my work. The house, once a source of stress and conflict, became a haven. It was quiet, organized, and finally felt like a place I could truly call home. Then, one day, she showed up. My ex-wife stood on the porch, her expression a mix of desperation and regret. She begged me to take her back, promising that things would be different this time. I listened without interrupting, letting her say her piece. When she was finished, I looked her in the eye and said firmly, "No. You made your choices, and I've made mine. This door is closed." She left, tears in her eyes, and I felt no remorse. My decision was final. She eventually moved in with her parents, where I heard she'd been staying ever since. We had no further contact after that day. I didn't block her number or go out of my way to avoid her, but there was no reason for our paths to cross again. I had moved on, and so, it seemed, had she. The chapter was closed, and I had no intention of reopening it. In the end, life turned out well for me. The house stood as a testament to my resilience, a place where I could build new memories and leave the past behind. My ex-wife's absence became a distant memory, and the peace that followed her departure was more than enough. The story had reached its conclusion, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free.
Title: At a charity event hosted by my wife, her lover's wife walked in, wearing my wedding ring. The look on her face told me everything I needed to know. David Miller had always thought of his marriage as the epitome of perfection. Married to Emma, a stunning and charismatic philanthropist, their life in the bustling city of New York seemed picture-perfect from the outside. Emma was a woman who could light up any room, especially at high-profile charity events like the one they were hosting tonight at the Plaza Hotel. The event was a grand affair, with glittering chandeliers, elegantly dressed guests, and the hum of refined conversations filling the air. As David stood by the bar, sipping his bourbon, he couldn't help but admire his wife's poise and charm as she moved through the crowd, shaking hands and exchanging smiles with New York's elite. Yet, amidst all the glamour, something felt off. Emma's usual warmth toward him seemed replaced by a strange aloofness, and David noticed her eyes darting nervously across the room, as if searching for someone. A pang of unease settled in his chest, but he brushed it off, telling himself that she was merely overwhelmed by the scale of the event. Little did he know, the perfect facade of his marriage was about to crack wide open in a way he could have never anticipated. As David lingered near the bar, his unease grew sharper, like a faint but persistent itch he couldn't ignore. The glittering charity event continued in full swing, with guests clinking champagne glasses and the soft hum of a live jazz band filling the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel. Suddenly the crowd seemed to part, and a woman entered the room with an air of quiet confidence that turned heads. Dressed in an understated yet elegant black gown, Clara Anderson walked in, her every step commanding attention. David's eyes were drawn to her almost magnetically, but what truly froze him in place was the familiar sparkle of a diamond ring on her left hand. His wedding ring. His heart skipped a beat, his mind racing as he tried to make sense of the impossible. Clara's eyes met his, and for a moment, the room seemed to shrink to just the two of them. Her gaze was calm yet piercing, a mix of pity and defiance that sent a chill down his spine. Summoning courage, Clara approached him, her voice low but deliberate. "We need to talk," she said, her words carrying a weight that made David's pulse quicken. She didn't need to say much. Her presence and the ring on her finger were clues enough that she held answers to questions he hadn't yet dared to ask. Her cryptic remarks about Emma and the ring only deepened his suspicions, pulling him into a web of betrayal he hadn't seen coming. In that moment, amidst the grandeur of the charity gala, David's world began to unravel, one veiled hint at a time. David's pulse quickened as Clara's cryptic words echoed in his mind. Determined to uncover the truth, he followed her through the lavish halls of the Plaza Hotel, leaving behind the bustling charity gala. They found a quiet corner in a side lounge, the muted light casting long shadows on the room's ornate decor. Clara's poised exterior began to crack as she sat down, her fingers nervously tracing the outline of his wedding ring. "Your wife and my husband," she began, her voice trembling with anger and pain. She explained how her husband, a successful real estate mogul named Richard Anderson, had given her the ring, a twisted trophy of his affair with Emma. "He said it was a souvenir," Clara spat bitterly, the words dripping with betrayal. As Clara's revelations unraveled, David felt his mind spiral. Fragmented memories began to surface. Emma's late-night phone calls she dismissed as work emergencies, the sudden weekends away for conferences, and the subtle but growing emotional distance between them. Each recollection now carried the weight of evidence, painting a picture he had been too blind or too trusting to see. Clara's story mirrored his own heartbreak. She spoke of her husband's lies, his frequent business trips, and the growing suspicion she had ignored until finding the damning proof: the ring. In their shared pain, David and Clara began piecing together the timeline of the affair. The gala, it seemed, was the nexus of their spouse's betrayal, a playground for their infidelity hidden in plain sight. Clara's heartbreak mirrored his own, and together they formed an unlikely alliance, determined to confront the truth head-on. In that quiet room, surrounded by the echoes of betrayal, David realized the perfection of his marriage had always been a facade, and the reality was far darker than he had imagined. The weight of Clara's revelations burned like fire in David's chest as they stepped back into the grandeur of the Plaza Hotel's main ballroom. The charity gala was still in full swing, the affluent guests blissfully unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. Fueled by a mix of anger and heartbreak, David could no longer contain himself. Spotting Emma by the stage, her radiant smile and practiced charm now felt like a cruel mockery of their life together. He strode toward her, his voice cutting through the hum of the crowd as he called her name. Conversations faltered, and all eyes turned to them as David confronted Emma under the spotlight she had so carefully curated. "What's this, Emma?" he demanded, holding up Clara's hand with his wedding ring glinting under the chandelier. Gasps rippled through the crowd, and Emma's polished facade faltered. At first, she laughed nervously, attempting to dismiss the accusation as absurd. But the weight of Clara's presence, combined with the undeniable evidence, left her no room to maneuver. As David's voice grew colder, recounting the details of her affair with Richard Anderson, Emma's composure crumbled. Her shoulders sagged, her eyes brimming with tears. Not of remorse, but of being caught. The tension reached its peak when Richard entered the room, drawn by the escalating whispers. His presence acted like gasoline on a fire. Emma instinctively stepped toward him, as if seeking refuge, but the act only deepened David's betrayal. Clara, unable to hold back her own anger, stepped forward to confront her husband. "How dare you?" she hissed, her voice trembling with fury as she detailed the lies, the deceit, and the ring that had shattered both their lives. Richard tried to defuse the situation, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, but the mounting evidence left no room for doubt. The room grew heavy with an uncomfortable silence as the public confrontation reached its breaking point. Guests exchanged uneasy glances, whispers of scandal spreading like wildfire through New York's elite circles. Emma and Richard, exposed and humiliated, stood frozen as David and Clara finally walked away from the confrontation, their pain now shared but their dignity intact. It was a moment of raw emotion and irreversible change, the perfect veneer of the gala shattered to reveal the dark truth beneath. As the guests dispersed and the once vibrant ballroom of the Plaza Hotel fell silent, David found himself alone with Emma in one of the hotel's private lounges. The tension in the room was palpable, the air heavy with unspoken words. Emma, her makeup smudged and her earlier confidence reduced to fragility, sat across from him. "David, please," she began, her voice trembling. "I can explain." But her explanation, rooted in loneliness, unmet needs, and misguided choices, felt hollow against the enormity of her betrayal. Each word she uttered seemed to widen the chasm between them. The trust that once bound them now shattered beyond repair. Meanwhile, Clara had already made her decision. She had left the event with her head held high, her resolve unshaken. In the back of a yellow cab navigating Manhattan's glittering streets, she texted Richard a single message: "We're done." Her decision to leave was swift but firm, born out of the clarity that there was no salvaging a relationship built on lies. For David, however, the choice was far murkier. As Emma's pleas turned to tears, he wrestled with conflicting emotions. Should he attempt to rebuild what had been destroyed? Or was this the end of a chapter he had once thought would last forever? His thoughts spiraled as he replayed moments from their marriage, the shared laughter, the quiet nights, the growing silences that he had ignored. Had he been blind to the cracks all along? Or had Emma's betrayal simply exposed the truth? That their marriage had been a facade, a carefully curated image for the world to see. Sitting in the dimly lit lounge, David felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. The fallout of the night had left him raw and broken, yet he also felt a strange sense of clarity. Whether he forgave Emma or walked away, one thing was certain: his life would never be the same again. As dawn broke over the Manhattan skyline, David sat alone in his apartment, staring at the wedding ring he had slipped off his finger the night before. The night's events still felt surreal, like a nightmare he couldn't escape. Emma had returned to their shared home after their conversation at the Plaza Hotel, her tear-streaked face a stark contrast to the radiant host she had been just hours before. The silence between them was deafening, yet it spoke volumes. David now stood at a crossroads, faced with the weight of a decision that would define the rest of his life. In one version of this ending, David chooses to separate from Emma, the betrayal too deep to mend. In a symbolic act of closure, he leaves the wedding ring on the kitchen counter before walking out of the apartment, the cool morning air offering a bittersweet sense of freedom. This decision, while painful, becomes a testament to his self-respect and unwillingness to live a life built on broken vows. Alternatively, David might find himself willing to rebuild, though not without conditions. He tells Emma that their marriage can only survive if she seeks therapy and earns back his trust, a journey that will require time, patience, and a genuine commitment from both sides. This decision reflects his capacity for forgiveness, but also his understanding that true reconciliation comes with boundaries and mutual effort. In a third possibility, the story concludes ambiguously. David walks out of the Plaza Hotel into the quiet streets of New York, his mind clouded with unresolved emotions. The readers are left to interpret whether he will choose reconciliation, separation, or something in between, mirroring the complexities of real-life relationships. Meanwhile, Clara finds her own sense of closure. Having confronted her husband and made the decision to leave him, she begins a new chapter of her life with her head held high. Her courage and decisiveness serve as a stark contrast to the emotional turmoil David is still navigating. Whether the story ends in separation, rebuilding, or ambiguity, the underlying theme remains the same. Betrayal may shatter the foundations of trust, but it also forces individuals to confront uncomfortable truths and make choices that shape their future. For David and Clara, the events of the gala mark not just an ending, but also the possibility of new beginnings.
The old Winchester might have been made in USA. Ted Vincent placed it in a tree overlooking the estate's pool. Wearing rubber gloves and using a small monocle, Ted was just 70 yards from the pool where several lounge chairs were set up. The pool was on the estate of Byron Diamond, a millionaire entrepreneur. The tree was outside the estate, but close enough. Byron Diamond employed Ted's wife, Kara, a beautiful woman with dark brown hair. She planned to spend the weekend at Diamond's estate, as she had for the past 4 weekends. She openly told Ted about her intention to have a physical relationship with her boss when Diamond's wife, Miranda, did charity work. Ted didn't know if Miranda was aware of Kara's visits, but the estate staff likely knew. Diamond and Kara walked toward the pool, with Diamond in swim trunks and Kara in a strip and skimpy top. This wasn't the first time Ted had seen them like this. Over the past weeks, he had carefully observed the estate. Now he felt it was time to decide the fate of the two lovers. Diamond's model-like good looks and muscular physique made a striking couple with Kara. Ted could somewhat understand why Kara was attracted to Diamond, but understanding didn't mean acceptance. From the moment she announced her intentions, he was firmly against it. Ted and Kara, both 37, had been married for 16 years and had twin daughters, Claire and Beth, who were 15 and resembled their mother. The girls were currently at Ted's parents' house before heading to football camp. Ted was supposedly biking with his best friend, Miles Jacobs, his business partner and friend since first grade. Their company grew, and both men became wealthy. Miles was married to Robin, his childhood love. Robin had been a childhood sweetheart of both Miles and Ted, but Miles won her heart. Ted never understood why, as he and Miles were similar in appearance. Ted accepted it and found Kara in college, who was all he ever needed. A few months ago, Miles waited on the bike path some distance away while Kara was about to get a big surprise. Ted saw Kara and Diamond embrace, and the hug turned into a kiss. As soon as they broke the kiss and Kara walked away, Diamond's chest exploded. His body pulled away from Kara, who screamed and fell to the ground. Blood was everywhere. She crawled to the pool and dived in. Ted had seen enough. He climbed down from the tree, ran up the hill, and threw the rifle into the bushes. He removed the stock cover and gloves, stuffed them into a plastic bag on his belt, and jogged to his bike. He rode to the main bike path and, after ensuring no one was nearby, biked about 3 miles to join Miles. They continued their ride, and about 6 miles later, Ted disposed of the plastic bag in a dumpster. They finished their ride and arrived at Miles's house. The rifle didn't concern Ted. He assumed the police would find it, but they wouldn't get any DNA. He had owned the rifle for many years, having gotten it from a dying acquaintance. There were 2 rifles and 2 pistols. The other rifle was from World War II. Besides the rifle used today, the other weapons were in Ted's weapons safe. This rifle was never in the safe. Ted kept it hidden in the garage closet. When Kara announced her intention to have an affair with Diamond, Ted immediately thought of the rifle. He took her to his country property over the next week to ensure she shot accurately. After some adjustments, the rifle was ready. When they arrived at Miles's house, Robin greeted them with cold beers, asking, "How was the trip, guys?" Miles replied, "It was great. The track wasn't crowded, and we had a good workout, about 4 hours." Robin, a pleasant-looking woman with dark hair, hugged them both. Ted found her attractive, though she was Miles's wife. After some beers and a shower, they sat by the pool. Robin asked Ted, "How long do you think this thing with Kara will last?" She knew about Kara's weekend activities. Ted had confided in them, and while Robin thought he should kick Kara out immediately, Miles suggested waiting to protect their business and children. Ted had already made up his mind. He despised men who slept with others' wives, especially his own. Ted responded to Robin, "I have no idea. But Robin, I hope to continue my relationship with Nora." Robin repeated, "I still think it's time for you to leave Kara." Robin and Kara were never close, though their families communicated. Miles' sons, George and Ben, were close in age to Ted's twins. Despite social gatherings going well, Kara and Robin moved in different circles. Kara had her country club friends, while Robin was active in the Democratic Party and book clubs. Kara's job changed when she was hired by Diamond 2 years ago, while Robin stayed at her old company. As Ted sat there, he reflected on recent events and Kara's betrayal. For 20 months, he had no idea there was a problem. Their bed life was unchanged, and Kara was present at their daughter's soccer games. He was shocked when Kara confessed her intentions, late one night, saying, "Ted, I don't want to, but I'm going to do something. I hope this doesn't ruin things. I love you." Ted, usually stoic, remained calm. Kara continued, "Byron and I have developed a crush. His wife is away every weekend. I'll visit him starting this Friday. I don't know when it will stop." Ted didn't react outwardly. Internally, he knew he couldn't stop her and wouldn't try. He also knew Diamond was as good as dead. So was their marriage. He hadn't decided what to do with Kara yet. He loved her, but her negative qualities had peaked. Remembering the rifle in the garage, he closed his thoughts. Kara was startled when Ted smiled after about a minute. His genuine smile, which was unsettling to her, was triggered by thoughts of the rifle. "Do you find this funny?" she asked heatedly. "Not at all," he replied with a smile. His smile sent a shiver down her spine. Ted stood up and asked, "Have you already had lovemaking?" Kara hesitated. "No, just a few kisses. I'll sleep in the guest house. Let me know when you're done with the rich boy. Then we'll see what's left." Ted walked upstairs to pack for the night. Kara, sitting in the living room, felt unhappy with the turn of events, but was determined to go through with her plans. It was Wednesday, and she was eagerly anticipating her weekend with Byron, who was younger, rich, educated, and well-built. She realized her attraction after seeing him shirtless in the office gym. Kara expected the affair to last a few months, maybe leading to something more permanent. She loved Ted and appreciated the life he provided, but she was restless and very attracted to Byron. She was sure she and Ted would work it out eventually. Ted, unable to sleep that Wednesday night, had a lot on his mind. The twins were staying with friends for the weekend, giving him time to think and check his weapons. On Thursday, he went to his usual cafe for lunch, where he sometimes dined with Nora Hansen, a young woman with an athletic figure and dark hair. Nora reminded Ted of Robin in both appearance and behavior. They had been flirting for weeks, but Ted had no plans to pursue her until Kara announced her affair. That Thursday, Ted sat next to Nora in the booth instead of across from her. Nora, used to men hitting on her, noticed the change and was pleased. She had been saving a place for him for 2 weeks, hoping he'd take the hint. Nora knew Ted was married, but found him tempting. She turned to him and gave a eliminator smile. "Something's changed, huh?" Ted smiled. "Yeah, my wife decided to fool around with her boss." Nora put her hand on his thigh. And I was wondering if you'd like to have dinner and dance on Friday night." "Oh, Ted, I'd really like that," she said softly. Ted grinned, feeling foolish. She patted his cheek. He was hard as a rock and struggled to control himself. She stroked his cheek and he kissed her lightly on the lips. "I better not stay here. We could be arrested." They exchanged phone numbers. Returning to work, Ted felt like a schoolboy. Some employees noticed his change. Kara noticed too when he walked briskly home. Again, he surprised her. "I made lasagna and salad," she said, considering it a peace offering. She expected Ted to take her affair hard, so his response was unexpected. "Thank you. I'm hungry." His mood had clearly improved. Kara was suspicious and wondered if he had already moved on. After washing his face, they sat down to eat. Kara made up her mind. "I'm going to his house tomorrow." He glanced at her. "It's not too late to stop, Kara. I believe you'll regret this." She hesitated. This was a different Ted. For a moment, she felt love for him, but struggled with it. "I need this, Ted." He smiled. "I don't think we use the word need the same way, Kara." She cleared the plates. "I hope you see your path clearly and will go to bed with me tonight." "No. You'll see me when you're done with the rich boy. It will be clear then." Kara was disappointed. She had envisioned a pleasant night of lovemaking to end this phase of their marriage amicably. But this wasn't destined to happen. She realized she was done with it. Ted paused before heading to the guest house. "Maybe something will come back then, Kara, but most likely nothing." He walked out the door. Kara sat at the table, realizing she was risking her marriage. She had hoped things might return to normal after the affair ended, but now knew that was naive. Continuing with Byron would change her life unpredictably. She almost decided to end it, but doubted Ted would ever see her the same. She decided to proceed. Friday evening, Kara packed her bag before work, including a new tight-fitting nightgown. She was nervous, but thrilled when Byron kissed her in his office. They left work separately to avoid suspicion. Kara arrived at the estate at 6. Byron welcomed her warmly, kissing her as soon as the door closed. Excited, she hurried upstairs to the master bedroom. Byron struggled to carry her, a reminder that he wasn't as strong as Ted. In the bedroom, they quickly undressed and had intense, thrilling lovemaking. Though brief, it was satisfying. Kara believed they could reach new heights together. Byron was pleased, feeling he'd conquered her. Kara decided to excite him again, and after some time, they had lovemaking once more. Later, they went downstairs for dinner, where a feast awaited. "Did you like it?" Byron asked. "Certainly. And you?" Kara replied. "The very best," Byron said. Kara sang "Simply the Best," better than all the rest, feeling a pang of guilt as it was a song she and Ted often sang. After dinner, they watched a romantic movie in the bedroom. Byron wanted more lovemaking, but Kara insisted on finishing the movie first. They had lovemaking again, this time in a more subdued manner. Kara was impressed Byron could manage 3 times, though the third time was less impressive. Ted picked Nora up from her apartment in his classic MGB convertible, one of his hobbies. Nora was delighted with the ride, and with Ted, who looked great in his blue suit. Ted was equally delighted with her stunning dark red dress with a plunging neckline. They went to the Willington Hotel for a wonderful dinner, then danced nearby. Ted, always athletic, was a good dancer, one of the things he liked about Kara. Nora, light on her feet and sensual in her movements, captivated Ted. She reminded him more and more of Robin, but younger and a better dancer. They danced until they both suddenly wanted to find another place. Nora got into the car and looked at him. "Take me to your home." Ted controlled himself during the drive and drove carefully. 15 minutes later, he opened the front door and let Nora in. They couldn't make it out of the living room. Nora quickly undressed and Ted followed suit. Standing, they stared at each other before Nora attacked, throwing Ted onto the sofa. They began with such intensity and zeal as never before. In the morning, they woke to sunlight, showered together, and Ted prepared breakfast. Nora watched him, feeling in love but cautious. As he served eggs and toast, she said, "I'm in love with you, Ted. I just have to say it." Ted, surprised, thought about it and replied, "I believe the feeling is mutual. Let it be." Hard to believe so fast. "They're done with the eggs now?" "What?" asked Nora. Ted smiled. "Guess," he said, picking her up again. Kara and Ted's weekend continued as it began. Kara was pleased with Byron, who gave her a lot of pleasure. Ted felt head over heels for Nora. On Sunday afternoon, Kara and Byron agreed to see each other the next weekend. Ted and Nora began thinking about their future. They set a date for next Friday, depending on Kara's plans, and agreed to meet for lunch daily. Ted dropped Nora off at her apartment. Despite her youth, she was a lawyer and could afford good housing. Meanwhile, Kara drove home from Byron's. Ted had just returned when she walked through the door. They stared at each other, and Ted couldn't help but smile. Kara noticed. "How was your weekend? Alone? How is Richie Rich?" Ted grinned. If Kara had been honest, she would have said Byron was exciting, but Ted was better. Instead, she said, "He was great. I'll be leaving again next week. The girls won't be back until Sunday evening." She knew her plan had gone wrong. Ted was too happy. She also felt nervous about how to tell the girls what was happening. For dinner, they ordered Chinese food. Ted met Nora for lunch every day during the week. They planned to go to a concert on Friday and spend the weekend at her house. Ted and Kara communicated mechanically throughout the week. At work, Kara and Byron were careful, and at home she hoped Ted would soften and take her back. No chance. Every night he slept in the guest house. In the evenings, he watched baseball or read, not talking to Kara. He basically ignored her. Their marriage was frozen. While in the guest house, he walked through the backyard, looking around the Diamond estate. Using Google Maps and night vision goggles, he began building a mental diagram of the place. He also bought a device that amplified sound directionally with cash. The following weekend, Ted and Nora had a great time, but then she had to leave for Sunday lunch with her parents. So, in the morning, they had their last meeting, and she left. Ted went to the Diamond estate and gathered more information. He had seen Diamond and Kara at the pool many times. It seemed to be where they spent a lot of time. He found that the directional device worked fine, allowing him to overhear some of their conversations. He found them boring. By the third week, the twins were home. They noticed their parents were effectively separated. At dinner that Tuesday, Claire asked, "Mom, Dad, what's going on?" Kara said, "We have some problems. We'll deal with it. Don't worry." The girls then looked at Ted. He shook his head. "The truth is, your mother decided to have physical relations with her boss, so I moved into the guest house. What will happen long-term hasn't been decided." Kara was angry at Ted for putting it that way. However, there was nothing to object to. She said, "I felt that I needed—" Beth interrupted. "A new man. Looks like it. How could you, Mom?" Kara stood up and ran upstairs. "Are you getting divorced, Dad?" asked Claire. "I don't know. Nothing's decided yet. But can you keep your mouths shut?" The girls answered in unison. "Yes." "Do you promise?" "Yes. I have a new friend I'll introduce to you this weekend when Mom goes to her new boyfriend." The twins were smart. Claire said, "You mean you have someone you want us to meet? So this must be very serious, right?" "Maybe. I mean, until Mom left, I never would have met Nora, but Mom went and so did I. And who knows who will end up with whom?" Beth grinned. Claire asked, "How did you manage to work so quickly, Dad? This doesn't sound like you." "I kind of knew Nora from lunches. Maybe I felt insecure or like I didn't measure up. And it seemed to me that Nora would like to go on a date with me. She really wanted this." The girls fell into a thoughtful and uncomfortable silence. Ted let them think. Finally, he asked, "Anything else at the moment?" Claire asked, "When? When will we meet her?" "I'll organize something for this weekend. You have a game on Saturday afternoon, right? Yes. Maybe Nora and I will come. This is serious, Dad. You're not ashamed to appear with her in front of our friend's parents. Ted wasn't surprised the girls were so perceptive. He believed they could figure this out. Nothing is set in stone now. I like this woman, and your mother ruined our marriage, but the situation is unpredictable. They left it at that. Kara never came downstairs. On Friday, she returned to Diamond's estate. She had a pleasant weekend, but sometimes got bored. Byron's physical repertoire was more limited than Ted's. Kara tried to introduce something new, but he wasn't receptive. Byron could manage at best 3 times a day, night, and he was quick and didn't like cuddling. This left a lot of time when they weren't having lovemaking. Since their affair was supposed to be secret, they couldn't go out. So they stayed at the estate. It was big enough for hiking, and they had a pool where they spent a lot of time. That same weekend, Ted took Nora dancing again, this time to a local club. One of her friends, Laura Blake, was there, and Ted was introduced to her. In reality, Ted had no intention of keeping his relationship with Nora a secret. They danced amazingly, then went back to Nora's. Ted left at 1 a.m. The twins were waiting for him. A wide smile appeared on Ted's face when he saw them in the living room. "You girls have a game tomorrow. You should get some sleep." Beth said, "We were waiting for you." Claire added, "I see you have a big smile. I bet you." Ted interrupted, "Never mind, go to sleep. Game at 10. Nora will come with us." Nora arrived at 8:30. She was nervous. Ted was nervous. The twins were nervous and insecure. When Ted opened the door and let Nora in, there was a long pause where no one said a word. Nora looked great. Finally, Ted said, "Nora, this is Claire and this is Beth." Nora smiled. "Hello. I think it's a little awkward, but maybe we have something in common. I played football in college, on the attack." "Where?" asked Beth. "Notre Dame," Nora said. Ted was stunned, and the girls were impressed. Beth, the troublemaker, had a soccer ball in her hands. She tossed it to Nora, who skillfully picked it up with her right foot and threw it back with her knee. Beth caught the ball. Nora smiled, and Beth and Claire smiled back. Ted said, then let's go." The girls were good at soccer. They usually dominated the center of the field, trying to control the game. Ted and Nora watched. Ted was watching closely, while Nora could hardly contain her excitement, jumping up and down in her seat. The other parents noticed her enthusiasm. The game was tense and exciting, with the other team taking a 2-goal lead, but the home team fought back and equalized. 2 minutes before the end, the opposing coach made a substitution. Beth stood next to Nora, who called her over and said, "They will try to pass by your side. Cut through and leave." Beth nodded, and Nora's analysis was accurate. Beth intercepted the pass and sped towards the goal. Ted jumped up, but Nora remained calm. Beth faked left, drew the goalie out, and kicked the ball into the net. The game ended immediately after this score. Ted and the girls celebrated with other parents. Nora stepped back, and when the celebration died down, Beth asked her, "How did you know?" Nora laughed. "I watched the game. I see the game when I watch." She patted Beth's hand. Several parents noticed the interaction. Joan Drake asked Ted, "Is she the twins' coach?" Ted replied, "No, she's my friend, but she played this game." The girls' coach, Lena Holmes, said, "Of course I remember her. She played for Notre Dame, on the attack." Ted called Nora over and introduced her to everyone. Nobody asked any awkward questions. In the car on the way home, Claire said, "Dad, you can guess what they're all wondering." Ted laughed. "Let them." The 4 of them stopped for pizza. Then Ted and Nora went to her house for about 3 hours. They returned with Chinese dinner. Ted was a bit worried about the food choice. After dinner, they had another long conversation about soccer. Beth Googled Nora and learned about her college career. Nora had studied there for 3 years. Around 9 p.m., there was an awkward silence. Then Ted said, "Girls, Nora and I are heading to the guest house." Beth said, "Be quiet, please." Nora laughed. "I promise to do my best." After Nora and Ted left, the girls discussed everything. They really liked Nora and saw how much their father liked her. They felt like their family life was over. It was an abrupt transition. Claire said, "It's not Dad's fault, is it? Mom left to study lovemaking with this idiot. I really hate her for this." "Me too." "I can only guess, but how could she just do that?" "Selfishness, that's all. We have to accept the change, Claire. Maybe things won't be so bad. I like Nora. Dad likes her too. But they haven't known each other long, right? So we don't know. Maybe Mom and Dad will make peace." "Maybe," Beth said dryly. They went upstairs, watched a video, and then fell asleep. Ted and Nora had a wonderful time again. In the morning, they prepared breakfast for 4. Nora set up an impromptu soccer lesson for the twins in the backyard. Then she had to visit her mom and dad. Ted and the twins had a long discussion about how to proceed. Ted tried to reassure them about their mother and told them that even if there was a divorce, they would stay in the house. He also assured them they would still have a lot of contact with both parents if they separated. They discussed how the girls should react to Kara, and Ted urged them to be polite. Then Kara appeared at the door, creating another awkward moment with everyone staring at her. Kara said, "I want you girls to know that I love you, and I love Dad too. This is true." Beth calmly replied, "Mom, that's what you say, but what you're doing says otherwise. I can't explain this to you. I just needed it. This won't last forever." Claire said, "Oh, I'm not so sure about this." Kara walked into the kitchen saying she was going to make dinner. The other 3 looked at each other. Nobody said much. Dinner was delicious, but stressful. Kara asked about the soccer game. Claire said, "Beth scored the winning goal. Tell her." After an awkward silence, Ted said, "Beth anticipated the pass and intercepted it. She went all the way and scored past the goalie." Kara praised the girls. Ted cleared the table and the girls went to their rooms. He went to the guest house. Kara said, "Ted, understand. I mean, you could spend the night here." "Never! Are you done with this idiot?" "I don't know. Maybe it wasn't what I hoped for. We stayed home all weekend." "You know, Kara, people will find out. They already know something is wrong. I don't want to embarrass you. And he doesn't want his wife to know." "It's a pity, Ted. A bit more, and it will end." "Kara, please understand. You ruined our marriage. It's over between us. So stay as long as you want. Just remember, he is all you have now." Kara was shocked by this frank statement. She sobbed once and ran upstairs. By morning, she decided to act normally. She had to go to work, and so did Ted. The girls were preparing for a trip to their grandparents' house, and then to an outdoor camp. Ted had lunch with Nora and explained what happened after she left. Then he went home to help the twins pack their things. Kara's plans for the day were disrupted when her friend Joan called. "Kara, who was that nice young woman who came to the football game with Ted?" Kara paused. "Which young woman?" "Oh, understand she's a former soccer player. Very pretty. We were all wondering where you were." "Damn it. Calm down, Kara. She and Ted didn't... There weren't any obvious signs, you know." "Oh, no? Well, they didn't tell me anything about her. What is her name?" "Nora." "Kara, where have you been? I heard something I can't believe." "Like what? Joan? Like the fact that you left Ted for your boss." "Not true. I didn't leave him." "Well, Jane Bright has a cousin at the club who works for Mr. Diamond in his house. The cousin said that on weekends when his wife is away, he has a woman there." "Crap. So it's you. God, Kara. God." "This shouldn't last too long, Joan. Only on weekends." "You're stupid. Ted already has another woman, and guess what? I don't blame him. She's younger and hottest. Your daughters seem to be already familiar with her. You've screwed up royally." Kara was truly shocked. That evening, she and Ted dropped the girls off at his parents' house. The ride home was silent, but when they entered the house, Kara confronted Ted and slapped him. He stepped back. "What the hell, you replaced me, you fool? You're complaining? What did you expect? You must have made preparations for my departure. How long have you been making fun of me?" "I only knew her from the cafe. We didn't even kiss until you went crazy with your boss. So screw you, cow." Kara stormed away. Ted went to the guest house, then walked out the back door. Wearing dark clothes, he found a good place to observe Diamond from a tree. That night, he intended to test a sound amplification device. He set it up and waited until he saw Diamond and his wife on the deck overlooking the pool. They sat and drank wine. As he joined their discussion, he heard Diamond say, "And it won't last long." "You have your boy toy," Miranda replied. "Only because you started it. This is like the 4th or 5th available girl." Diamond said, "I support your style, Mira. Don't ruin it." "Why are they always married? Do their husbands know?" "Yes, I force them to tell their husbands about it. I like it better this way. When we have social events at our company, I smile at all the idiots." "Someday, boy, you will cross the wrong person." "Nope. What will they do? They may divorce their wife, but they all have children, so they don't do it. They just accept it." "So what if they end up getting divorced?" "It's a pity. You're one of the biggest pricks in the world." "Ugh, a real idiot." "But I'm good in bed, right?" Miranda laughed. "What do you think? My Deshawn is better." "Ha, nonsense." Diamond laughed. The conversation trailed off. Ted got down and walked away. Until this moment, Ted had thought dealing with Diamond was unnecessary and risky. But now he had Nora. Kara and her antics made it possible. Maybe he thought he should thank Diamond, but the conversation he just overheard reignited his burning anger. The next day, he walked into Miles's office, and they talked. Nora spent the weekend with Ted and the girls. The couple slept in the guest house, but otherwise interacted with the twins almost like a family. After Saturday's game, there were more soccer lessons. Saturday night, Ted and Nora had a fantastic time in bed as usual. As they lay in bed, Nora asked, "What happens next, Ted? I mean, maybe it's weird to ask this, but are we exclusive?" Ted laughed. "You mean, do I sleep with my wife on the side?" Nora giggled. "Yes. I'm absolutely not going to do this. I'm a one-woman man. You can be that woman if you want. I feel like I'm ruining my marriage. You two have been together for so long. Not you. Once Kara went to her boss, I was done with her after a few hours. Very quickly, in fact. I felt it freeing, and I benefited. I'm happy with it." The next morning, they had another fun run and then went to prepare breakfast. Nora went to her parents' house a little early to help her mother with an unusual cake. Ted told the girls he was going for a bike ride with Miles and that he'd see them later. He hugged each one tightly and left. Earlier that week, Ted had prepared the rifle and left it by the tree, loaded and wrapped. As he hid his bike and headed there, he half hoped someone would take it, but everything was in place. He had serious doubts even when he was backed into a corner. But he kept remembering the conversation this prick had with his wife Miranda, and then he saw his almost undressed wife kissing the guy. He thought, screw this, it's time to end this crap. As Ted and Miles sat drinking beer after the bike ride, Robin ran out of the house. "I saw it on TV. Diamond was shot. He is dead. Diamond is dead." Ted quickly stood up. "What about Kara? They said that a woman was present, but she was not injured." Miles exclaimed, "Oh my God." He took out his phone and turned on the newsfeed. Miles kept Ted's cell phone with him the entire trip. It was in his belt bag. He waited until Robin looked at his phone before handing Ted the phone. But Robin saw it. She didn't think much of it at the time. Ted tried to call Kara. No answer. He said, "I better go home. Maybe someone called." He left on a bicycle. When he returned home, the landline phone was ringing. "Hello, is this Ted Vincent?" "Yes. This is Detective Harvey from APD. There was a shooting, but your wife was not injured." "You're talking about Diamond? My friend told me what happened." "I can't comment on this. Mr. Diamond is dead. Your wife is here at the station. She is completely shocked. Can you come get her?" "Certainly. Where?" "Main office, 3rd floor. Please contact the front desk." Ted put on shorts and a t-shirt over his cycling gear. He had a wallet and phone in his fanny pack. He grabbed the car keys and drove off, unsure of what to expect. He was told he could see Kara after the conversation. Detective Harvey, an older fit white guy with gray hair, had a partner, Stella Blaine, an attractive and tall brunette. Ted sat with them in a small room and answered all their questions. They asked about his day, and he recounted the bike ride and all. They then asked if he knew Kara was involved with Diamond. "Yes." "How did you feel about this?" asked Harvey. "I didn't like it, but I moved on." "What does that mean?" "I have another interest, another woman." "Oh, so you have an open marriage?" No. As soon as she announced it, that's how I reacted." "Do you have a weapon?" "Yes, I have a weapon safe. We'll have to look into it." "Fine. We'll go home together." The police gathered details about the bike ride, addresses, and who Ted met with. Then they left him in a small room for a while. The door was locked. Ted just sat there looking at his phone. About 15 minutes later, Harvey returned and asked if they could look at his phone. Ted said, "I have work-related stuff on my phone that I don't want public, nothing illegal. We could get a warrant." He decided to let them take the phone. He was told it would take 30 minutes. Then they took him to Kara. She was wearing a t-shirt and jeans, not hers. She looked scared. Ted said, "Kara, are you okay?" "No, God, he got shot. I was right there. There was blood everywhere." "I'm sorry, Kara. Once they're done with my phone, I can take you home." "Okay, Ted." Pause. "Ted, I regret all of this, but we can talk on the way home." He hugged her. Soon the detective brought the phone and the couple left the station. When they were in the car, Kara asked, "Ted, did you shoot him?" "No, maybe I don't regret that he was liquidated, but I didn't do it." Kara stared at him. "I know you. You could have. But you found the right girl, so you didn't. Did you see him get shot?" "No. I heard a shot, and it all exploded." Now she was crying. She was sobbing. Ted pulled the SUV into the driveway. He escorted Kara inside and led the arriving police officers to the weapon safe. They examined the weapon and asked about the ammunition. There was an unopened box of .30 caliber ammunition. They were not interested in other ammunition. When they got back outside, Harvey turned to Ted and said, "We'll take DNA and fingerprints from the rifle we have. I would advise you not to interfere with this, Mr. Vincent." "Well, I don't know about any weapons, and I didn't shoot anyone." "Fine, see you." Ted went inside to deal with his wife. However, before doing this, he called Nora and told her what had happened. She knew some details. He asked if she would come over later, once Kara had calmed down. Then he called his parents and daughters. They discussed the events of the past day for a long time. One question was whether the twins would go to outdoor camp next week. It was decided that they should leave. To avoid any confusion, Kara took a long shower. Ted inquired about her mental state. Not surprisingly, she was distressed. He was waiting for her when she came out in a robe. "It must be difficult. Have you cleaned up enough?" She smiled. "No, but the water ran out." "Yes, I guessed. What can I do for you?" "Well, maybe we can order pizza. I'm starving." Ted did it. Kara looked at Ted over her pizza. "I was thinking about you. I'm not so sure you're innocent. Where have you been today?" "On a bike ride with Miles. I told the cops." "He might lie for you." "Yeah, but he doesn't have to lie. I admit I have some anger issues at times, but I didn't shoot that idiot. He was an idiot." "You were right about that." "Are you going to divorce me?" "Maybe. I mean, you threw it in my face. Kara, after so many years, you needed some rich boy. I agree he was good looking. He was good." "Honestly, Ted, he wasn't. He didn't really live up to his looks." "Yeah, it's true. You have some kind of woman, Nora. I was told she's younger and more attractive." "Yes, she is quite attractive and athletic. She played soccer in college." "And she just picked you up right away?" "I bet you mastered it before I had Byron." "No, maybe around the same time. First we went dancing. Why? Are you interested?" "I probably won't have a job." "You will leave me. I know I have to live, and we have a marriage contract." "I won't let you starve, and maybe you'll have a job." "Maybe." "Miranda probably isn't too happy with me." Ted's phone rang. It was Nora. He walked into the living room. Kara followed him. From a distance, she heard their declarations of love. If she had been wearing shoes, she would have kicked herself. As Ted tried to persuade Nora not to come, Kara entered the room. "Let her come, Ted. I think it's time for us to meet." 30 minutes later, the doorbell rang and Ted let Nora in. Kara was already dressed. She looked tired, but still attractive. The two women looked at each other for what must have been a full minute. Then Nora said, "I'm sorry. You must be very shocked." "Thank you. This is true. It's all so confusing. You took my husband." "You left him. It is not my fault." They were about 10 feet apart. Ted positioned himself to intervene if necessary. Kara was shaking and started sobbing again. Nora stepped towards her and hugged her, letting Kara cry on her shoulder. Ted was amazed. Nora sat Kara down on the couch, maintaining contact. There was room for Ted too, so he sat next to Kara and hugged her as well. Kara sobbed, gasping for air. She sobbed, "Such a fool. Sorry, such a fool." Kara's crying subsided. She stood up a bit and asked Ted, "Do you think the hot water is ready?" "Maybe," and got up to take another shower. After she emptied the tank again, Ted gave her a pill, and she fell asleep on their bed. Ted and Nora went to the guest bedroom. They didn't want to leave Kara alone in the house. They watched the news. At 10, Diamond's homicide was widely reported. As it turned out, Diamond had many affairs with married women who mostly worked for him in one way or another, so Ted was far from the only suspect. Later on CNN, it turned out that some people also had business reasons for eliminating Diamond. Finally, there were suggestions online that Diamond's wife could be involved. Ted turned off all media. After 11, he and Nora went to bed. Neither of them really wanted to have lovemaking at first, but Nora was silent. Ted woke up early and checked on Kara. She slept until 9, then took a shower. At 10, all three were sitting at breakfast, eating pancakes that Nora had whipped up. Mozart started playing on Nora's phone. She answered, and it was the police to arrange an interview. Nora asked Kara and Ted, "Should I ask them to come here?" Kara nodded. "We can get the latest news." At 11, Detectives Harvey and Blaine came and took Nora to a private room to take a statement. This took about 25 minutes. Then they all met in the living room. Kara asked, "Any news about who did this?" Blaine said, "Not yet. Many people had a motive, including you, Mr. Vincent." "We've already discussed this," Ted frowned. Yes, well, thank you all for your cooperation, Harvey said. They left. Robin called and said the police were coming to take a statement. They were polite but persistent and scrupulous. Ted told her he would see Miles at work. All three were somewhat confused, not knowing what to do. Should I leave? Asked Nora. Kara said, No, I understand Ted might want you to stay. Ted nodded. They all sat on the back patio drinking coffee. Kara's calm returned, but she seemed sad. Ted and Nora seemed to be expecting more problems. Kara held her temples. I keep seeing him dead. He still didn't move. I wonder if I'll always see this. Nora seemed to want to console her. In my course on the psychology of grief, they said that images are the most persistent thing, but over time they fade and are erased. I really hope so, Kara's voice broke. Do you have news from work? Ted asked. No. I worked directly for Byron. I acted as a sort of dealer for the goods sent to him. I let him see some things, but took care of other things myself. Whoever takes his place will need someone like me. Who will it be? Asked Nora. My only guess is Miranda. I know what was in his will because I signed it as a witness. She gets everything except some things for his mom. Okay? Do you want to work there? Yes. Like I said, I need to support myself. Huh. Ted looked at Nora. Well, until you get back on your feet. Did you two sleep in the house last night? It's clear that this bothered Kara. Nora nodded. In the guest room. I hope this continues for some time until I get back on my feet. There was a double meaning in Kara's words, and neither Ted nor Nora missed it. Ted didn't mind. Everything will work out on its own, and the girls will be back briefly next week. Nora, they told me you went to their game, Kara remembered. Yes, it was exciting. I missed it, Kara sobbed again. I feel like such a fool. He had a whole string of women. He manipulated us all. Well, he was a handsome prick. You made a big mistake. Nora tried to calm her down a little. I think you've been unhappy for a while, Ted said. Here at home, not at work. Kara thought and said, This is true. I don't know what caused it. Maybe something like, the grass is greener. Then a big hole opened up and swallowed my life. She stood up and ran inside. After a while, the clink of pots and pans was heard. Kara baked a chocolate cake that was ready by noon. Eventually, Nora and Ted came into the kitchen and began to watch, talking incoherently about something. They ate sandwiches while the cake cooled enough to frost it. So the day continued. Nora made burgers for dinner, and Kara made a salad. The three of them did something, but hardly talked about the future. Kara went to bed at 9 o'clock. Twice she woke up from nightmares, once screaming. Ted came in and calmed her down. The next morning, Tuesday, Nora had to go to work. Ted also wanted to go to the office, but he was worried about Kara. While he was thinking, Kara's phone rang. It was Miranda. Kara put her phone on speaker. Will you come to work today? I have a job. Yes, I understand the situation is difficult, but something has to be done, and you can't be replaced right away. So despite your stupidity about Byron, I need your help. Kara looked at Ted. He nodded. I can be there in an hour. Fine. Come to the house. Walk behind so you don't get caught. Kara met Miranda in the office on the second floor. Miranda extended her hand for a handshake, and Kara accepted it. Miranda began, I'm curious, before we get down to business, why Byron was able to get his hands on you. I saw your husband. Did he disappoint you? Oh no, but Byron looked so good. Yes, but that was not the case. Not that good, actually. I've already begun to understand this. Not bad, but no more. Best case scenario, he had a tendency to fade. Perhaps you and he have not reached this stage yet. Maybe. Well, let's get started. The two of them worked all day, bringing Miranda up to date. They also considered how to handle Byron's affairs, but the body had not yet been returned. At 6 in the evening, Miranda looked up from her work and asked, Can you stay for dinner? We still have a lot to do. Certainly. I have Ted and his girlfriend at home. That's what I heard. She's pretty. Yes, and young. He slept with her the first night I left. So they are really connected. Looks like it. My girls like her too. Miranda looked at Kara and smiled. Well, if you need some relief, I can lend you one of my boy toys. They know how to satisfy a woman. Kara blushed. Miranda, thank you, but I'm not ready yet. Just let me know. You know, now that we women are running the company, maybe the guys will have to make room. Is there anything you need? Well, if it comes to that, a toy boy will do. I don't want to destroy any family. You're too cute, Kara. They ate, and Kara went home. At 9:30, Miranda gave her a significant raise. Ted and Nora were interested to see how Kara was doing at work, given the complexity of the situation. Kara described her day and the work she had to do, and she told them about her promotion. "So I won't be a burden. Looks like I can support myself." It sounded pretty bleak. Ted said, I... Kara interrupted. "You know, Miranda offered me a boy toy to use if I needed it. I refused for now." Nora gasped. "Really? How do they look?" Ted was a little annoyed by this, but said nothing. "I don't know. I didn't even know Miranda had them." For the next 6 weeks, Kara worked for Miranda 6 days a week, either in the office or at her home. The work was moving forward. Ted started getting divorced about 2 weeks later. This came as no surprise to Kara or the twins. Miranda hired Kara a lawyer, but the details were easy to work out. The parties agreed and signed a few weeks later. The twins stayed in the house with Ted and Nora. Kara didn't mind that much. She gradually moved towards peaceful coexistence with her daughters. They often spent their days off with her. Ted and Nora returned to the main house. Nora gave up her apartment. Essentially, she took on the role of mother to the girls. The situation became more and more comfortable. One night, Nora and Ted, having completed another pleasant session of lovemaking, snuggled up to each other. "Nora, do you want to get married?" Nora tensed. She looked at him. "Yes." They kissed. Nora said, "I want children too." She looked at Ted with some trepidation. He hugged Nora. Redipping into diaper changing. Okay. They kissed again. They got married 6 months later. 2 months later, Nora became pregnant. Meanwhile, the police investigation into the sensational homicide of a millionaire reached a dead end. Gradually, the crime disappeared from public view. From time to time, some journalists raised this topic, and it faded again. Authorities spent a lot of time checking the alibis of everyone they thought had a motive, including the 6 husbands. They got nowhere. Some had no alibis or weak ones, but the police did not have the results of an examination of the prints on the rifle and indeed no concrete evidence, and there were no witnesses, despite numerous public appeals to people who may have been on a side trail near the shooting site. The police checked Miranda. She was with 2 young men several miles from the shooting scene. They checked to see if she had ordered the shot. Even though the shooting did not appear to be professionally executed, nothing was found, perhaps because there was nothing to look for. Their attention to Ted quickly faded. Miles had a very convincing alibi as a traveling salesman. In the end, the matter went into dormant mode, slightly reminding itself from time to time. Soon, Kara became absolutely indispensable to Miranda and the company. She was smart, passionate, and knew more about operations than anyone else, with the possible exception of the late Byron. One Saturday afternoon, Miranda and Kara were getting ready to go out. Kara had a room in the house. She went upstairs to take a shower. Until now, she had never gone to the pool. Miranda had no problems with the pool. It bothered Miranda that Kara had an issue with the pool. So that Saturday, Miranda found Kara drying herself with a towel after her shower and tossed her a robe. "Come with me," Miranda said. Kara was confused, but Miranda was the boss. She followed her. Miranda walked to the door that led outside to the pool. Kara stopped. Miranda said harshly, "I have a treat for you, but you have to go outside to get it." Kara hesitated, but then she thought maybe it was time to step outside. There were 2 sun loungers by the pool. Miranda walked past them, and Kara followed. There were 2 young men there, both undressed, both beautiful and well-endowed. One was black, the other white, but well-tanned. Kara was stunned. Miranda said, "You haven't slept since the shooting happened. This is Damon, and this is Chad. You have a choice, but you must choose one." Kara stood there looking at the men. She got excited, opened her robe, and threw it on the floor. She slowly walked towards Damon, staring at him. "Hello, Damon. My name is Kara." Damon smiled. "Nice to meet you, Kara." Kara and Damon put on quite a show for Miranda and Chad, who were just watching. Miranda and Chad gave them a round of applause. And that's how Kara's fear of the pool was overcome. Kara's life changed dramatically, but not in a bad way. She had her choice of boy toys and a job she loved. She spent Sundays with her daughters and sometimes with Ted and Nora. When Nora gave birth to little Bryce, Kara was thrilled, but a little jealous. Ted and Nora were very happy too. One day, when the women were alone, Nora asked Kara about her bed life, and Kara told her. Clearly, Nora's lovemaking with Ted was exciting that night. This had subsided a bit since the baby was born. Now Nora was back into the rhythm. From time to time, Nora and Kara would start another conversation. This was always enough. Kara thought of it as a family ministry that she was happy to do, some compensation to Ted for her blunder. Soon, baby Nikki appeared. As they say, all's well that ends well. One evening, after all the children had gone to bed, Robin found herself walking around the backyard with Ted. She stopped at the guest house and turned to him. "Nora and I like each other," she said. "I'm pleased," Ted smiled. "You know, back then you could have had me. But I chose Miles. Do you know why? I could never understand you. You have inner anger, maybe from your parents. You're hiding it, but it's always been there, and I still love you." Maybe so, maybe. I rarely think about it. I think sometimes, and yet you have created a good life for yourself and your loved ones, and for Miles, and me too. But Ted, I saw Miles handing you your phone after your bike ride. I saw. I didn't immediately realize what this meant. You took a hell of a risk, and so did Miles. One damn chance. Ted was silent for a moment, looking at Robin. "Do you think I should get some counseling?" Robin smiled. "Do not do that. It's you. So it was and will be. And remember, Miles and I still love you." The weeks passed. The police investigation was at a standstill, and the diamond case was slowly being forgotten by the public. Ted and Nora continued their life together, happy with their growing family. Kara remained an integral part of the business and found her own happiness, albeit in an unconventional way. The twins adapted well to the changes, supported by the loving presence of both their parents. In the end, life moved on for all involved. They each found their way, forging new paths and finding solace in the present, leaving the past behind. In this complex web of relationships and emotions, they discovered a new kind of harmony, one that allowed them all to coexist and thrive.
I came to a quiet countryside to recuperate because I wasn't feeling well. As I was trying to get my health back on track, I learned that something had happened to my wife. I was born and raised in the countryside and went to college in New York, where I met my current wife on a popular website at the time. Being the eldest of 3 siblings with a younger sister and the youngest, a brother, my sister got married in her 20s, causing my parents to worry about me still being unmarried. I was working for a foreign company in New York, a top choice for college students at the time. I was in the sales department, working on a project that had me dispatched to another company. My brother, who was in the same field, also lacked a girlfriend. One day, he signed up for a site and found my future wife. "Bro, this lady looks really pretty. Try sending her a message. If it works out for you, I want to get a girlfriend too." The woman my brother found seemed very cheerful. With a nothing-to-lose mindset, I sent her a message. She replied the next day, and we started communicating, leading to a meetup the following week. A significant reason why I could marry my wife was that our homes were close. Her place was just 4 subway stops away from mine. On our first date, we ate pork cutlets, had coffee, and then watched a soccer game at a pub the next day. Though she seemed uninterested in soccer, she joined me to support my interest. She had a beautiful and bright personality, and we saw each other every day, leading to a proposal 100 days into our relationship. She nodded silently when I proposed, and we told our parents we were dating and wanted a future together. The following spring, we got married with many blessings. I have a significant wound from when I was young, due to my father's harsh actions, causing many scars. Sometimes, when I'm sleep-deprived or extremely tired, I lose consciousness. But medical checkups show nothing wrong, and I'm quite athletic. On the morning of our wedding, the makeup artist told me about a previous client whose husband fainted during family photos. My wife was shocked, asking what that meant. He hid his illness, and the tension made him collapse, the artist explained. "What happened to them?" my wife inquired. They came to pick up their album and said their family was furious, wanting a divorce. But what can you do? They're living well now, the artist replied. Hearing this made me inwardly flinch, feeling a connection to their pain. I've been happy since getting married. My wife whispered her love, saying, I wish I had met you earlier, so we could have dated for years. Meeting someone like you is my luck. Let's live like newlyweds forever. Initially, it wasn't easy to spend the allowance my wife gave me. I kept my wallet with me, picking up my wife's favorite fruits on my way home. Life felt like playing house. My wife had a demanding job, while mine was just a 5-minute drive from home. She had to commute an hour by subway. Her earnest efforts in balancing work and managing our household endeared her to me even more. Despite my love for exercise, I've never been as physically strong as others, often staying up late for my hobbies. One day, we discovered my wife was pregnant, and I was thrilled at the thought of becoming a father. However, she miscarried at 12 weeks, and her bright demeanor faded. I suggested over dinner at her favorite restaurant that perhaps the loss was due to the strain of her job on top of pregnancy. I told her, it might be tough, but you can quit your job if it becomes too much. You know I can take care of us. She decided to wait and see. 3 months later, she was pregnant again and chose to leave her job to protect this pregnancy. Carefully, we made it past the critical 12 weeks, and our baby grew healthy. We welcomed our daughter first, followed by our son the next year, becoming parents to 2 children born close together. Life was a whirlwind with hardly any restful nights. Elderly advice suggested that raising children close in age might be tough initially, but easier later on. Until the kids were 4, I hardly remember how we managed. There was even a time we had to hospitalize them due to high fevers. Luckily, living in the same apartment complex as my in-laws, their help was invaluable. With the kids, my wife hardly met friends outside instead. She'd invite them over for delivery food and playdates. My career advanced, requiring more of my time, sometimes even on weekends. As the kids started elementary school, my wife began meeting friends for morning exercises or learning new skills at cultural centers. She created an online community to share and gift her crafts. However, when our children were in lower elementary, I started experiencing health issues, leading to frequent collapses and a diagnosis of autoimmune hepatitis. Despite the medication, my health didn't improve. The desire to fulfill my role as a provider was strong, but physically, I was struggling. Eventually, I suggested to my wife that we take some time off near my parents' place to recover. She agreed to discuss it with my parents. We decided to leave our children with my in-laws and move to a rental home 20 minutes from my parents for convalescence. It wasn't a severe illness, but the need for early recovery was clear. Thus, we began our unexpected journey to recovery. You've really been through a lot, taking care of me and preparing for this retreat, I said. What are you talking about? Your health is the most important thing. There's nothing I can't do once you're better. Yeah, I really owe you one. Meeting someone like you was like hitting the jackpot, he said. Let's head down and take a good rest. We've been running forward nonstop, she replied, and that's how their life in the countryside began. Thanks to his frugal wife's wise investments, they had some savings. This allowed them to lease a place where he could start learning woodworking, something he had always wanted to do. and even buy some materials. With a yard at their disposal, they could work on their projects without worrying about noise. His wife constantly reminded him not to overdo it, and they took daily walks around the house and got plenty of sleep. He, having always been handy, fell in love with the charm of woodworking and began creating pieces one by one. His wife started selling crafts she learned to make at the community center online. Luckily, former executives from his company who had resigned offered him work so he could also have a side job. Although their income wasn't what it used to be, it was enough to indulge in their wants and buy materials. Enjoying the freedom to work at their own pace without the pressure of commuting was a blessing, and he felt his health improving. His city-born wife missed the bustling city life despite the poor air quality, but she enjoyed living in the countryside too. There were many abandoned houses near their home, and a few elderly women in their 80s and 90s. Greeting these seniors during their walks made them naturally share their story, allowing them to feel the warmth of the countryside. One morning, while they were eating, an elderly lady called out, "Hey, young dad, come out. I've brought some potato soup for a snack. I picked some doragi. It's good for your health," another added. These seniors looked after the couple, attentively, prompting them to buy protein drinks for them in gratitude. Then one day, a young man moved into the house across from them. The house had been occupied by a couple who moved to the city to help their son with his children. The new neighbor, a tall and handsome man, said living in the countryside was on his bucket list, and he wanted to experience it before getting married. Despite the convenience of city life, he felt it was now or never. He was a sports massage therapist and never short of work due to referrals. His wife, always keen on learning new things, suggested he try getting a massage from the man after receiving a sports massage. He had the best sleep since moving to the countryside. His wife began visiting the man's house regularly to learn massage techniques. He also taught them lymphatic massage. Every night, she would give him a lymphatic massage, ensuring a good night's sleep. However, he started noticing changes in his wife. She hadn't worn makeup since moving, but she did when visiting the neighbor. He brushed it off, thinking she just wanted to wear makeup occasionally, a mistake on his part. His wife had been giving him nightly massages before visiting the neighbor. He felt like he had been hit with a hammer when he learned about his wife's outings from Elawan, an elderly lady who often brought them snacks. He had once accompanied Elawan to the market and briefly chatted. She walked at 9 p.m., sometimes with other ladies from the community center, sometimes alone, fearless despite the lack of streetlights in the rural area. Concerned for her safety, he had suggested she exercise in her yard instead. Laughing, she had replied, "What business would an old lady like me have? A short walk helps me sleep well." That morning, Grandma Elawan showed up at our doorstep. "My wife had just stepped out. Don't be startled, but a few days ago, while taking a walk, I saw your wife entering the house across the street. Was she bringing them some side dishes at night?" I didn't think much of it, completed my walk, and when I passed by again, I could hear laughter coming from inside. Standing quietly in front of the house, Elawan could clearly make out that it was indeed my wife's voice leaking from inside. I was infuriated to realize I had been asleep, unaware that my wife had gone out. I wanted to confront my wife, but it wasn't possible. She usually put me to bed at 9 p.m., and I had set an alarm for that. Right at 9, she would start giving me a lymphatic drainage massage, and I'd fall asleep immediately. The alarm was set for 9:10 p.m. Waking to the alarm, I found my wife was already out. The front door of the neighbor's house was firmly shut, but I could hear voices inside. My wife was sighing. It feels so good. And she didn't return home until 1 a.m. She went to the neighbor's house every night. It wasn't right for a wife to leave her husband asleep and go out. And I began to wonder whether I should forgive her or if it was time to reassess our marriage. Elaine happened to pass by, so I greeted her, and she asked if I could pick up some soap and detergent from the store if I was going. My wife had left for the market that morning. I invited Grandma inside and discussed what she had witnessed, questioning what I should do next. Do what feels right. If you can think of it as a passing breeze and let it go, do that. Divorce isn't easy. Think about the kids, she advised. She shared how her husband had affairs, and despite the heartache, she chose to stay for the sake of their children. But when he passed away, she felt nothing. Living here had improved my physical health, and I felt it was time to move to New York. I had an interview for a job reentry last weekend and was waiting to hear back. Grandma thanked me for sharing, mentioning, "After the old man went to heaven, I sometimes miss him. Maybe that's what marriage is." We spent that day together. Afterward, Grandma visited our home a few times. Eventually, my wife and I harbored significant secrets while living in the countryside. Then, I received the job offer. Packing for the move, Grandma Elaine gifted me a bottle of homemade plum extract, whispering, "I've put a note inside for you to read alone." It read, "Thank you for making me feel like a woman. Take care of yourself." I made a serving cart for Elaine, tailored for her bent back, as a token of my appreciation for helping me understand my wife's actions and deciding what to do next. Now in New York, amidst the bustling life, I occasionally miss our life in the countryside.